Timeless Assassin by author Raj_Shaw_7152. Chapter 351 to 375. Over the next 20 days, Leo entered Castle Bravo again and again. Every morning, just after the priest vanished into the main tower, he slipped through the same breach in the wall, and made his way across the courtyard and towards the teleportation gate. Once within the castle walls, he did not so much as breathe too loud, as if the sound of oxygen entering his lungs might draw death toward him. However, no matter how many times he returned to the castle, the pressure he felt within never faded, as every day he felt the same ancient corrupted mana coil against his skin like wet ropes, making his body inevitably sweat buckets, and his knees to turn into jello. However, despite the pressure, he did manage to creep across the courtyard every day, moving past the collapsed arches until he reached that weathered ring of stone and glyphs that was his new workstation. Each session, Leo gave himself precisely 1 hour. 60 minutes and not a second more. As he hid behind a broken pillar, unwrapped his tools with care, and began to work. On the first day, he spent the entire hour clearing moss. Not with magic, as he did not dare disrupt the mana around him, but with a dagger and a soft cloth, as he cleared every inch of sickly green growth that pulsed faintly with decayed energy. It was the mana-absorbing kind of moss, the one that could interfere with circuitry if left unchecked, and hence had to be unquestionably removed. However, the process of removal was not without its problems, as the removed bits often clung to his hands like a parasite, and even after he brushed it off, the itchiness lingered, and a significant chunk of the mana within his body was drained. The second and third days were spent on rune cleaning. Lacking proper tools, Leo fashioned a makeshift brush by binding supple tree branches to whittled roots, its bristles coarse but precise. He dipped it into high-grade mana potions, then gently traced the ancient, corroded lines, each stroke slow, deliberate, and respectful. Once the outlines were reawakened, he pressed a mana stone against each glyph, coaxing the dormant energy to stir and resume its flow. Many glyphs had fused or cracked due to corrosion, so he charted them meticulously in his notebook before beginning repairs. Every curve, every flourish of a rune mattered. One misplaced stroke and the gate might overload the moment it received power again, so he did it with extreme care. However, the nerve-wrecking part wasn't the work, but rather the not knowing. He had no idea if the whisper behind him was just his paranoia or death. No idea if that shift in energy he spotted inside the barracks was the armored guard waking up, or just a random spike. No idea if that flicker of mana in the air meant detection, or it was just an environmental phenomenon. And yet, he continued. He brought out mana stones that he had carried with him from the outside world to serve as replacement array cores, as although he did not have the traditional crystals used to power the structure, the high-grade mana crystals theoretically contained more power than the ancient crudely mined crystals, and could serve as a viable replacement. To test his theory, he reconnected the circuits from the power board to the command plate, and thankfully he could see the mana flowing through the circuits again, as everything from the power core to the command station began to work smoothly. The next step was to repair the command station, and input it with the correct geological code linking it to the exact teleportation center that he wanted it to move him to, which was a slightly tricky job, considering how his knowledge about this world's language was self-taught and not something he was fluent in. Regardless, by the 12th day, he managed to successfully re-etch 2 of the primary coordinate rings, as he cross-referenced them to the geological books he had brought with him from within the conclave to make sure that he had calibrated the device correctly. During his repair work of the central command, he discovered that most of the gate's outer mechanism was still intact but badly imbalanced. That imbalance had to be corrected slowly, segment by segment, or the reactivation sequence would be turbulent and the structure could collapse. Hence, starting from the 14th day, he began repairing the external structure as best as he could. He was no stone mason, but he placed stones near the chipped parts of the gate and tied them tight with ropes, hoping to give it enough structural strength to hold strong. It wasn't the best method for sure, but it was the best he could do, as he worked as methodically as he could to reduce the imbalances to a minimum. However, with him constantly feeling paranoid for his life while working, whenever he heard even the faintest rustle or screech in his surroundings, he immediately activated Stormflash Traverse and bolted, leaving his work at once, and returned to safety at his vantage point. Often, this affected his work speed, and stalled his progress, but despite the slow work, by the end of the 17th day, he somehow managed to complete most of the reconstruction, bar for the final part which was entering the third and final coordinate ring. Each time he came back, the fear he felt in his bones was the same. He never got used to it. Never felt comfortable. Every stone he touched felt like it might explode. Every glyph he activated felt like it might sing to the priest, and every step he took inside that courtyard made him feel like a condemned man walking the gallows, waiting for the rope to tighten. But the gate slowly came alive. Piece by agonizing piece, Leo managed to bring it back from the dead. And when at the 21st day, he finally repaired the third and final coordinate ring, he knew that it was time to finally start planning the actual heist, as the escape mechanism was finally ready to be used. Time-stilled world, Castle Bravo perimeter, Leo's POV. Once the repair work was done, the most difficult part truly began, which was planning how to carry out the actual heist. So far, although Leo had scouted the outer courtyard in suffocating detail, mapping every collapsed arch, every inch of stone between his entry point and the teleportation gate, he had not even gotten a peek inside the central structure, which was where he suspected the treasure being kept. Leo knew that if he wanted even a sliver of hope at completing this mission without dying a gruesome, meaningless death, then he needed to figure out a way to breach that structure and scout its interior. But every time he so much as looked at it from his perch in the tree, his instincts screamed at him to look away. He didn't want to go in. He couldn't go in. Not while that thing, that robed priest with its faceless mask and silent footsteps, resided within those walls like a sentinel carved from some forgotten nightmare. He remembered what he'd seen. How even the air shifted when the priest passed. How even beasts stronger than him fled at its approach, tails tucked, claws trembling. And how just being outside the courtyard when it passed made his body feel like it was being slowly crushed by a weight that wasn't physical. So the idea of voluntarily stepping inside the same structure that creature called home. It felt suicidal. A gamble no sane assassin would even entertain. And yet, as he watched day after day, taking notes, memorizing patterns, sketching maps, and fighting against the creeping sense of dread that coiled tighter around his chest with every sunrise, something changed. It happened on the 23rd morning. He was watching from the tree again, eating cold rations with numb fingers, when the priest exited the building for its usual incense-burning ritual, walking that same unnerving circle around the inner courtyard. But what caught Leo's eye wasn't the priest, it was what it ignored. Two Grandmaster-ranked wolves were loitering in the courtyard, pacing too close to the building, one of them even pawing at a broken pillar. They collapsed into a pool of nerves when the priest walked out, the pressure too suffocating for them to move, as they whimpered and sniveled, and yet, the priest didn't turn. Didn't flinch. Didn't react. It kept walking, slow, methodical, as if the creatures didn't even exist, giving Leo hope that perhaps it too ignored Grandmaster-tier beings. Leo sat up straighter, heart skipping a beat. It doesn't register them as a threat, he whispered, eyes narrowing. Maybe that priest isn't a fighter-type ghost. He held his breath. A thought clawed its way up from the back of his skull, rising like bile in his throat. 15 minutes. That was the window. 15 minutes from when the priest exited the structure to begin its ritual, to the moment it returned. 15 minutes where the sanctum stood open. Unguarded. Quiet. Just once. Just one trip. In and out. No touching. No breathing too loud. No big risks. No sudden movements. Just a glance. A survey. A chance to see what was really waiting behind those towering doors, so he could build a real plan, not one crafted from guesswork and desperation. His hands shook. His breath came shallow. But he made the decision anyway. Because if he didn't do this, he might as well call it quits now, as attempting the mission blindly and without a proper plan, was guaranteed to lead to death. Dash 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 dash. And so, the next morning, at the precise second the priest vanished through the main gate, Leo leapt from the tree, blinked into the courtyard in a burst of stormflash traverse and sprinted low, barely daring to breathe, as he slipped through the colossal doorway of Castle Bravo's central tower. And what he found inside made him forget how to move. The air struck him first. Not with heat, not with cold, but with something ancient. It pressed down on him like liquid lead, seeping into his lungs and bones, wrapping around his heart like an invisible noose. The scent was thick, like burnt parchment and decayed flowers, and the silence was deafening, the kind that made one's own heartbeat sound like a war drum. He staggered forward, eyes wide. And then he saw it. A church. Or something older. Circular. Hollow. Lined with faded pillars carved in a language he didn't know. The walls were inked with black-stained murals of death and rebirth, of worlds crumbling and flames swallowing cities, all centering around one colossal, cracked painting that took up the entire far wall. Zonrock, the two-legged lizard god. His body was cloaked in stone armor. His hands stretched over a pile of skulls. His crown broken and his eyes glowing with divine wrath. Beneath that painting stood a simple, unadorned stone table, and atop it, the origin medal. Two small pieces. Not locked. Not sealed. Just placed there, casual, defiant, humming softly with that same pulse that made Leo's fingertips twitch and his vision blur for a heartbeat. It did not look like anything special, just two pieces of iron ingot if one was not specifically taught to identify it. And if Leo had not seen its picture before, it was an object that he wouldn't have been able to recognize either. In front of the table that contained the origin medal and resting like a centerpiece between treasure and the painting, was the ancient casket. Long, gleaming, etched with gold and blackened glyphs that shimmered with residual power, as just glancing in its direction made Leo feel powerless and dizzy, as he nearly fainted from a glance that did not even last a full 2 seconds. Don't look at it, don't go near it, his instinct screamed at him, as he moved as far away from it as he could. He did not touch anything within the room, nor did he cross the floor, as he simply stood at the threshold, memorizing the layout, the position of the table, the number of steps to the exit, the shadows in each corner, all the while trying to calm the thunder thumping loudly in his chest. Then, when the 5th minute of the 15 was almost up, he turned, slipped out, and vanished in another silent flicker of teleportations. As it was only after he collapsed under the roots of his vantage tree, drenched in sweat, with fingers digging into the dirt that he finally allowed himself to breathe again, as he could feel his heart beating out of his chest. That was the most dangerous thing I have ever done, Leo said to himself, as he placed a hand over his thumping heart, trying to calm it down, while breathing in an unsteady rhythm, as his mind recovered from the dizzy fog that it felt ever since he glanced at the casket. The resting place of an ancient god, Leo thought, as he could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, as his fight-or-flight response was fully activated. I can do this, he finally whispered to himself, admitting what he had been too afraid to admit aloud until now. His voice was hoarse, low, almost broken. I know what I'm stealing now, he said, more confidently now, as for the first time since entering the time-stilled world. He began to believe in his odds to succeed. Time-stilled world, the perimeter of Castle Bravo, Leo's POV. Once Leo realized that he could potentially pull this mission off, he turned into a man possessed, as he began obsessing over every little detail of the plan to ensure that it was flawless. For the next few days, he spent every waking minute shadow executing the heist in his mind, running through it again and again, until he could visualize it down to the smallest twitch of muscle. He planned everything, from where exactly he would plant his feet to the precise points where he'd trigger Stormflash Traverse to shave off milliseconds of travel time, as he overlooked nothing. He measured every distance with surgical precision, memorizing how long it took to cross each segment within the courtyard, counting every single step from the breach to the altar and back until the sequence became a mantra, echoing through his dreams. He timed everything. Exactly 18 seconds to slip through the outer breach, crawl beneath the archway, and activate the teleportation gate, assuming he didn't stumble or freeze. Then 12 more to sprint across the courtyard, hug the far left pillar, and reach the entrance to the altar hall. Once inside, he assumed that he needed about 10 seconds to grab the origin medal. 0.2 seconds to trigger Storm Flash Traverse. And another 1.1 seconds to reach the teleportation gate and escape. The margin of error was non-existent, because he had no idea whether the priest and the guard would ignore him. Or would they try and stop him once he touched the medal? As although it took 70 seconds for Zarnok's soul to stir awake, those two were entirely different problems. One misstep, and it could all be over for him, which was why he needed to time this to heist perfection and leave nothing to chance. So he did exactly that, and drilled the entire routine into his muscles until thought was no longer required and his limbs could act even if fear hijacked his mind. He re-memorized the terrain as if it were a sacred scroll. The loose gravel near the fourth column. The fractured tile by the teleportation base. The slightly elevated stone slab near the threshold of the central hall, just high enough to catch a toe and ruin everything. He catalogued every hazard, every nuance, every inch of that cursed courtyard, so that when the moment finally came, there would be no hesitation, no surprises, no fate left to chance. As by day 40 of 42, he was absolutely prepared to carry out the plan. The next day, one day before the heist, Leo decided to eat like a king. Not because he wanted to celebrate, but because deep down, he wasn't sure if he'd still be alive to enjoy food again tomorrow. He gathered the finest ingredients from his storage ring, sealed packets of smoked meat, half-dried herbs from his supply stash, a rare block of preserved cheese he had been saving for an emergency, and began preparing them over a small fire. He even went as far as to bring out the only mana-infused wine bottle that he had brought to this world, the kind that warmed the chest and cleared the mind. As for the first time since entering the time-stilled world, he took his time cooking and not just reheating dry food over a tiny flame or biting into ration blocks between drills. He set up an actual campfire, which he put together using slow-burning logs from the Dreamwood Grove, as he carefully roasted the meat over it, until the edges crisped and the fat sizzled, before adding some sliced roots and crushed herbs for enhanced flavor. He then plated the meal on a steel tin, sat cross-legged beneath the roots of his vantage tree, and ate slowly, like the taste of the meal actually mattered. Every bite he took was deliberate. Every chew, thoughtful. As though his body knew this might be its last supper and wanted to savor the world one final time. The food warmed him, steadied his hands, but it didn't silence the storm in his chest. Because although Leo was confident in what he'd prepared, and knew he had done everything within his power to set the board in his favor, he also wasn't delusional. He understood the risks of this mission. He knew that the margin for error was so slim it might as well not exist. As he knew that even in the best-case scenario, the odds were stacked against him at a 70-30 ratio. To be fair, it was not a terrible ratio, but it wasn't good enough either, as the chances to fail were still significantly higher than those to succeed. On one hand, he had memorized every escape vector, trained every motion to perfection, and eliminated every visible flaw from his plan. While on the other hand, he still did not know if the priest could sense movement once the altar was disturbed, or if the silver-armored guardian would awaken once the teleportation gate hummed to life. As if any of those things happened even a few milliseconds earlier than expected. There would be no second chances. Just a quick trip to the afterlife. Sigh. Leo exhaled slowly through his nose and glanced up at the gray skies above, that looked as washed out, dull, and lifeless as the world around him. I'm doing all this just to see you again, he thought, the memory of his family steady in his mind, as it grounded him in purpose, and reminded him once again that failure was not an option. Sip. He lifted the tin cup of warm mana wine to his lips with a steady hand and drank without hesitation. I've done all I can, he whispered into the stillness, letting the words settle into the silence like a quiet promise. If I die tomorrow, at least it won't be for a worthless cause. There was no fear in his voice. Only resolve. As when he finally lay back against the cold earth, blade within reach, cloak drawn over his chest like armor rather than comfort, he did not close them as someone fleeing from what lay ahead. but rather as a man who was ready to face what was to come next. Because he knew, by the time he woke again, it would be time to steal from a god. The time-stilled world, just outside Castle Bravo, Leo's POV. At dawn, Leo watched the priest walk out of the altar room, incense stick in hand, moving with the same eerie precision it had displayed for the past 41 mornings. But today, the sight of the priest's white robes made his stomach twist with anxiety. Because today, that silent figure didn't just mark the beginning of another patrol, but rather marked the start of his mission. The priest coming out means it's dawn. That means, I need to start counting down from 4.5 minutes, Leo thought internally, as he jumped off his vantage point and quickly made his way towards the broken hole in the castle wall, where he waited until his internal timer of 4.5 minutes ran out. The rescue plane that the serpents sent inside the time-stilled world arrived every 90 days, exactly 5 minutes past dawn, staying for a brief 2-minute loop before leaving the dimension again. And Leo aimed to catch the plane coming today in the last 10 seconds of that window, when the plane's sensors were still looking for survivors, and when Zonrock's soul was still seconds away from fully stirring awake. It was a gamble balanced on a blade's edge. Aiming for that narrow timing meant maximizing his odds of extraction, but it also meant that any delay, any hesitation, any misstep could render the entire plan meaningless. If he missed the teleportation gate activation by even 3 seconds. If he tripped over a loose stone. If the origin metal took longer to lift than expected. Then this wouldn't be a rescue. It would be a suicide. Focus. Leo took a slow, silent breath, as he crouched low behind the weathered stones of the breach, and shut out the negative thoughts eating away at his mind. Only the countdown mattered now. 15 seconds left. He flexed his fingers, rolled his shoulders and reset his breathing. 10 seconds. He reached into his utility belt, brushing his hand against the edge of the sheathed dagger, which gave him some courage. 5. He got ready to move. As the second the timer turned to 0, his body moved before his thoughts caught up. As exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds after the priest came out, Leo entered Castle Bravo, exactly like he had planned. Leo darted forward, cloak trailing soundlessly behind him, as he slipped through the gap in the wall and surged across the outer corridor, moving low and tight, hugging the ruined masonry for cover as his boots landed exactly where they were meant to, stone to stone, breath to breath. No deviation, no second thoughts. His legs moved with mechanical precision, driven not by instinct or panic, but by the sheer weight of repetition drilled into muscle. 16 steps past the broken arch. 3 short bounds to the edge of the inner wall. And then, click, he landed beside the ancient console meant to operate the teleportation gate, and began tampering with it, just as he had practiced, his fingers flying faster than thought. For a single heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, shroom, the teleportation gate flared to life, bathing the corridor in a pale blue glow, its rings pulsing with awakened power for the first time in thousands of years. It worked. Holy shit, it worked, Leo thought, as he nervously glanced at the teleportation gate, that was ready to teleport him to the exact coordinates he had input the moment he stepped through it. However, although he was slightly happy that it worked and was holding stable, he was more worried about the structure coming to life attracting the attention of the priest or the guard. As for a couple breaths' time, he waited to see if there was any reaction. He had already decided that if he felt like his life was in danger after he activated the teleportation gate, he would immediately bolt and escape this world without completing the heist. However, even when he fixed the teleportation gate, there seemed to be no reaction from the priest or the silver-armored guard, as even after 2 breaths passed, they did not stir or try to attack him. This is it, this was my last chance to bail if anything went wrong. From here on out, I'll either live, or I die, Leo concluded, as once he realized that he was safe, he immediately began making his way towards the altar room, exactly as planned. He moved with measured urgency, fast enough to stay on schedule, but quiet enough to remain undetected, as he slipped away from the humming teleportation gate and began weaving through the inner corridor. His eyes flicked to the path ahead, then to the notches in the stone he'd carved days ago to mark where he needed to place his skill anchors. Here, he reminded himself, as with a silent mental command, he set his first Stormflash traverse point into the cracked arch near the second bend, etching it with a single pulse of mana. 1 down. 3 to go. Breathe slow. Count steps. 7 strides to the hollow column. Another anchor. 5 more past the crumbling arch to the shattered vase embedded in the wall. Anchor. Every movement was rehearsed, burned into his nerves like muscle scripture. There was no room for improv, no margin for sloppiness. And yet, despite the rhythm, the flow, the success of each perfect placement, his chest felt heavier with every step. Because the closer he got to the altar room, the more nervous he felt, with the pressure from within the room also intensifying. The pressure was like a static weight in the air, a density that clung to his skin and made his breathing feel thinner. And then, he arrived at the edge of the threshold. The entrance to the altar room loomed ahead, veiled in a dim, unnatural glow, as though the chamber beyond obeyed laws different from the rest of the world. As reaching that point, Leo's pace finally slowed down to a crawl. He pressed his back to the wall, his heart hammering now, not from exertion but anticipation. Sweat beaded across his brow as he peered around the corner, and saw it. The altar. The casket. The mural of Zonrock towering over it all in haunting silence. And just below it, there it was. The origin metal. 2 shimmering blocks resting atop a stone table, looking mundane and unprotected. 10 seconds to steal the blocks, Leo reminded himself, eyes locked on the table like it might vanish if he blinked. But the moment he stepped across the threshold, it hit him. Boom. A weight crushed down on his shoulders, invisible but suffocating, like the atmosphere had suddenly thickened tenfold. His knees nearly buckled, and his vision swam. As the air inside the room simply felt wrong. Fuck. Leo gritted his teeth, as he forced a foot forward. Then another. His breath became ragged, his heart rate spiking beyond 200, as each movement he made felt like trudging through a storm that hated his existence. Place the marker, he ordered himself, voice tight in his mind, as he forced his mind to conjure the skill and place yet another Stormflash traverse anchor onto the ground, midway between the entrance and the altar, which was his last and final teleportation point. This was supposed to be the easy part of the heist. The part that he had already planned for and rehearsed countless times in his head. However, just completing this part alone felt so ridiculously difficult to Leo, that he could not even imagine how tough the rest was going to be, as at that point, just staying upright felt like defying the will of God. The time-stilled world, altar room, Leo's POV. Don't look at the casket, don't look at the casket. Leo kept mumbling the words inside his head like a broken mantra, as he forced his eyes forward and moved with deliberate steps toward the stone table at the far end of the room, refusing to acknowledge the looming sarcophagus that lay between him and his target. He knew that nothing good would come from him turning his gaze towards Zarnok's casket, or his painted mural, and hence he mentally forbade himself from even looking there. Step, step, step after step, he inched closer to the table, despite the mounting psychological pressure. However, the moment his boots crossed the invisible line that placed the casket in his peripheral vision, Leo felt his vision double, his mind go blank, and his legs nearly give out beneath him, as though some unspoken pressure had curled its fingers around his skull and had begun to slowly squeeze him. His eyelids drooped, feeling unnaturally heavy, and the struggle to stay conscious turned even more intense, as his eyes simply refused to cooperate with his will anymore. No, you don't. You can't sleep yet. Not till you're safely out of this world, Leo reminded himself, as he grit his teeth and pushed through on sheer willpower alone. He stumbled forward, half dragged, half propelled by sheer will, as he managed to make his way to the stone table with a couple seconds left to spare. This is it, I hope they're not unexpectedly heavier than they look, Leo prayed as he reached out to pick up the 2 blocks of origin metal, only for a scream to involuntarily escape his lungs the second he touched them. Arghhhhhh. He nearly dropped them right then and there, as a blinding pain erupted through both palms, searing his nerves like the metal had been forged in the heart of the sun. It felt hotter than molten lava, as despite looking mundane and unassuming, its surface temperature was as hot as red-hot iron, even though it did not radiate any heat to its surroundings. A normal man would have dropped the blocks the second they touched them, however, Leo did not let go. Pushing through the pain, he gripped the blocks of metal hard, as despite the mind-numbingly hot objects tearing into his flesh, he activated Stormflash Traverse and instantly vanished from the altar room in a blur of blue lightning. Yet just as he escaped, just as his previous anchor point flared beneath his boots and he vanished in a blur of motion, the world around him responded to the theft, not with noise or light, but with gravity, like an invisible force collapsing inward, folding time and weight around him in a slow, inevitable crush. Because that was when the casket began to tremble. And the pressure in the air, which had already felt like a dense fog pressing against his skin, suddenly surged to monstrous levels, growing so heavy, so suffocatingly thick, that it felt like a mountain had been slammed onto his back, flattening his lungs and crushing the strength from his bones. The soul of Zonrock was stirring in response to its treasure being stolen, and the sheer aura it exuded was impossible for Leo to bear even for a single breath. Tremble. The altar chamber, once dim and unmoving, now pulsed with something ancient and malevolent, as Leo felt a dreadful awareness crawling into his spine and burrowing into his thoughts, as it threatened to choke the breath from his throat with nothing but presence alone. Parallel processing. He triggered it with gritted teeth, and at once, the chaos slowed, as his vision stretched, his heartbeat fragmented into smaller, more measurable fragments, and his mind began dividing the incoming flood of information into parallel threads, each one trying to keep him alive. His second teleportation point came into view the moment he rematerialized, right beside the cracked archway which was the entry point into the altar, where his instincts screamed at him to move again, because from the periphery of his sharpened vision, he caught a flicker of dangerous motion. The priest. It was no longer still. Its faceless mask now glowed with ghostly violet light, its eyes burning through the fabric of the world like cold fire, as it gazed towards Leo with sheer unbridled fury. The incense stick it once held had been replaced by a divine sword now, that glowed with blood-red runes dripping with killing intent. And it was chasing him. No, not chasing. Gaining. Leo teleported again, and looked back again, only to realize with rising horror that the priest, despite merely running while he was teleporting, had already halved the gap between them. No, that's not possible. He's not supposed to be that fast. He realized, horror gripping every cell in his body, as he activated Stormflash Traverse again, slamming unbelievable amounts of mana into the next checkpoint with reckless speed, as he teleported forward in a blur of light, now reaching halfway across the open corridor. Can I make it? He wondered, as he could feel the ghost gaining on him, however he only had a short distance left to reach safety. By now his hands were trembling. His breathing wasn't regulated anymore. His chest rose and fell in short, panicked bursts, and his thoughts, though split and clear, were repeating themselves, looping with dread. This will be close. He pushed off again, stumbling slightly before stabilizing mid-step, as his eyes locked forward, because just ahead, maybe 20 meters at most, was the teleportation gate he had activated earlier. It pulsed with pale blue light, shimmering with barely contained energy, as it gave him hope to escape from this cursed castle at once. He needed one last jump. One last breath to reach it. But then, he saw it. To the right, standing not even 40 meters away, like a statue born of war and metal, was the silver-armored guard. It already had its blade half drawn, its posture coiled and perfect, like a killing machine awakened to exterminate a mischievous rat. Its intent was so sharp that it sliced the air around it without moving, as just looking at it, Leo couldn't help but feel like, it's over. That was the thought that came unbidden, uninvited, before he forced it out. No, not yet. Don't think like that. Move, he told himself, but his legs didn't respond as sharply now. His body was lagging by fractions of a second, fractions that mattered. Because the pressure he felt boring down on him from all directions was no longer something that he could simply shrug off. Behind him, the priest with the divine sword was closing the distance between them impossibly fast. To his right, the guard, poised to strike, was on the verge of unleashing his attack. And behind it all, like a suffocating curtain of malevolence, Zarnok's soul was rising, and with it, so was the pressure in the corridor, until the walls and the ground below his feet itself began to tremble. He was running out of time. He was running out of space. And even though the gate was just ahead, so close that he could almost feel the dimensional energy tugging at his skin, the seconds left before impact, before interception, before annihilation, felt both too long, and not long enough. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. The time-stilled world, corridor outside the altar room, Leo's POV. Just 20 more meters. Leo gritted his teeth as he triggered Stormflash Traverse one final time, hurling himself forward with everything he had left. His muscles screamed in protest, each fiber tearing at the seams, while his lungs struggled to draw in even a sliver of air, as though the atmosphere itself had thickened into tar. Every nerve in his body burned, not just from the physical pain, but from the invisible weight pressing down on him, from the suffocating presence of death that lurked behind him, reaching closer with every heartbeat, with every flicker of hesitation he couldn't afford. He didn't dare look back. Didn't dare flinch. Didn't even breathe. Because he knew. Hesitation meant death, and every microsecond mattered now. He could feel it in his bones. The priest's cursed blade was already in motion, humming with divine wrath as it thrust forward with precision, aiming to impale his heart from his back. While to his right, the silver-armored guard had already released the all-powerful sword slash. The same one that had annihilated that transcendent tier specter in a heartbeat. The one that seemed to be a domain skill rather than just a simple attack. As he could feel both those attacks closing in on him at once. Reappear. As he reappeared from the last teleportation step, the gate was right there before him. Not even a meter away, as he took the last step and dived headfirst towards it, jumping in with all the momentum he had left. 0.9 meters. 0.7. 0.5. His heart pounded so loudly now that it felt like it echoed through his bones. As at this instant he could feel it. He could feel the pressure of the sword slash that was almost upon him, and the tip of the sword thrust that had almost touched the fabric of his robes. As at that instant, death seemed all but inevitable. Until, in that exact instant, everything suddenly blurred. As the moment the distance between him and the teleportation gate was reduced to 0.2 meters. The gate began to pull at his body. Reality twisted. The world shattered. And Leo was no longer there. A flash of blue engulfed him, the portal swallowing his figure whole in a blink so exact, so impossibly precise, that had he been slower by even 0.01 seconds, the sword would have split his skull and the priest's blade would have pierced his heart in the same breath. But he timed it. He actually timed it. To perfection. And as his body dissolved into the currents of dimensional energy, flung between space with the origin metal still clutched firmly in his bleeding hands, Leo finally managed to escape Castle Bravo. Barely. But still alive. Dash 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 dash. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence, as the sound of the ground and the trembling castle walls was replaced by the steady beat of his heart thrumming against his ears. Shua. His body floated through the teleportation gate like a weightless feather, as the crushing pressure that he felt just a moment ago, vanished suddenly, and was replaced by a sense of achievement and relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no threat, no sword, no pressure enveloping him, as he could finally breathe steadily again. But that relief unfortunately lasted only for a single breath. Because the second breath that followed came with a twist in his gut, as his mind snapped back to reality and reminded him. It's not over. His stomach lurched with sudden dread, even as the last shreds of dimensional static peeled off his body. Because though he had escaped the Castle Bravo, he wasn't free yet, not even close. He was set to reappear just under half a mile away from the pickup zone. And he had exactly 40 seconds left to make it to the plane and board it now. Dash 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 dash. The wastelands below the exit portal, just east of the extraction zone. Flicker. Leo's boots hit the cracked, barren earth as he tumbled out of the rift like a cannonball, momentum carrying him forward as he crashed onto one knee with dirt exploding beneath him. But even before the dust could settle, he heard it. Weo. The roar of jet engines, distant but present. As he felt equal parts relieved and equal parts anxious to hear it. Still here, thank the gods, Leo thought, his eyes darting toward the sound, just in time to catch a glimpse of the massive dark gray jet, parked just above some 500 meters away, its ramp still lowered as survivors sprinted toward it in ragged clusters. Waitt. Wait for me, he screamed, his voice sounding raw and torn as it came out from his throat, as he launched himself across the dry cracked land, the wind screaming past his ears as he accelerated to his top speed. Zhoop. His legs moved with a desperation that defied physics, mana bursting out from every circuit in his body as adrenaline flooded his system and drowned out the mental fatigue. His skin burned, his bones groaned, his palms, still seared from the burn that the origin metal had given him, but Leo didn't stop. He continued running, as he slid the origin metal blocks into his spatial pouch, and closed his fists to accelerate faster. Shrew. The engines flared louder now, their pitch rising as the vehicle powered to take off, the blast of wind nearly knocking the last survivor off his feet as the ramp began to tilt upward. But Leo didn't slow, he sprinted with everything he had. 10 meters. 5. He dove. Thud. He slammed into the floor of the craft just before the ramp sealed shut, his body skidding slightly on the metal floor as the jet began to lift. The hell? His arrival startled the passengers already seated, a few gasping in shock at the sudden impact as his blood-streaked form slid into view like a missile. But Leo didn't have time for stares. Go! He roared at the pilot, voice breaking as he slapped his hand against the wall, his other hand pointing out the window in sheer panic. Go! Fucking take off now! The pilot blinked, just once, then shoved the throttle forward. The twin jet engines roared with full thrust, and the ship began to ascend, tilting to escape the crumbling time-stilled world beneath them. Leo turned to the window, his heart pounding against his ribs, as he stared out into the distance with bloodshot eyes, praying that they moved fast enough to escape. Because by his count, it had been exactly 44 seconds since he touched the origin metal. Which meant there were only 26 seconds left for him to escape this world. 26 seconds to escape an angry god that had already begun to wake up. 26 seconds to live and succeed or to die and be destroyed. As although Leo had no idea if it was going to be enough or not. Internally he prayed that it was. Because at this point, he had truly done all he could to make the plan a success, and it would be a shame to fail after coming this close. Inside the jet, ascending from the time-stilled world, Leo's POV. Once inside the jet, Leo did not take a seat. He couldn't. Instead, he simply stood at the jet's window, fingers clawed around the back of the seat in front of him, knuckles white, shoulders hunched forward as he pressed his forehead against the cold pane, watching, waiting, as the scenery below began to blur into rapid ascent. 47, 48, 49. The numbers echoed in his skull like war drums, not loud but persistent, each tick a hammer to the nerves threading through his spine. The jet roared louder now, engines straining, tilting the aircraft sharply as it climbed toward the exit portal, towards freedom. And yet Leo didn't feel free. Not yet. 56, 57, 58. The G-force slammed the rest of the passengers back into their seats, some groaning from the pressure, some gripping their harnesses with pale, trembling hands, but not Leo. Leo stayed standing, legs braced, hands trembling from exhaustion as he held on with everything he had left, the strain in his forearms a whisper compared to the weight pressing on his mind. Come on, just a little more. He whispered it like a prayer, like a mantra, as his gray eyes refused to blink, refused to leave the window. As if him looking away would change the odds of his survival. 65, 66, 67. It was at this point that he finally saw it. A shadow spreading far faster than anything natural, devouring the world below like spilled ink, as the already dim skies turned pitch black, darker than night, darker than death itself, as if the god they'd stolen from had finally opened its eyes. Asterisk lub, dub. Asterisk lub, dub. Asterisk lub, dub. The sound of his heartbeat grew louder in his ears, louder than the engines, louder than reason, louder than fear, until all he could hear was that horrible, suffocating rhythm pounding through his veins. And still the darkness rose. Closer, closer. His throat was dry. His lungs wouldn't move. He couldn't even scream. He could only watch, eyes wide, lips parted, as the edge of that abyss raced toward them. Hey guys, is anyone else seeing this? Why is a dark shadow engulfing the entire world below us? One of the other passengers asked worriedly, as his question drew the gazes of many towards the window pane, only for their view to be abruptly cut off when the jet approached the exit portal threshold. Shift. Once the jet reached the exit threshold, the edges of the world below began to ripple, the gray haze beneath them peeling away like discarded skin, replaced not by light, but by the familiar, endless black of space. The teleportation boundary. They'd crossed it. The jet lurched one final time as the realm below severed its grip, hurling them into interdimensional airspace, out of reach, if only just. I did it. I actually did it, Leo thought, as although he did not collapse into a puddle, his fingers did slip slightly from the seat, muscles no longer able to hold. He exhaled. Once. Twice. Then finally slumped into the chair behind him. He didn't need to count anymore, but he did so anyway. 69.4 seconds. Give or take. That's what it had taken from the moment his fingers touched the cursed blocks of origin metal to the second they'd broken free from that world. Just a little over a minute. But it had felt like an eternity. Like the longest and most stressful 70 seconds of his entire fucking life. And yet, somehow, he had survived. Somehow, the boss had prevailed yet again. Dash 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 dash. Leo stared blankly through the window, the abyss outside now calm, cold, and lifeless, utterly indifferent to the storm he had just barely escaped. And then, he laughed. At first, it was a quiet sound, a breathless puff of disbelief, like a dying man coughing out seawater after crawling onto the shore. But then it grew. Ha ha, 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 ha 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 ha. The sound escaped his lips like a crack in his sanity had burst open, as if the sheer pressure of surviving something that no one was supposed to walk away from had finally snapped something loose inside him. He tilted his head back, laughter pouring out of him like blood from a slit artery, as his body shook with each wheezing breath, pain forgotten in the wave of absurd, elated hysteria that washed over him. A few passengers turned, then a few more, brows furrowed, eyes wary. One man even reached to unclip his belt, just in case. The hell's wrong with him? Was he infected by the taint? I think the world below scrambled his brain. But Leo didn't care. He didn't even hear them. He just kept laughing like a madman, one hand slapping his own forehead over and over again, chuckling through gritted teeth as the enormity of what he had just pulled off finally hit him. Ah, ouch, shit, ouch, he hissed, as the adrenaline finally began to fade, the world slowly sharpening again around him as sensation returned, first to his spine, then to his arms, and finally to his hands. That's when he saw them. His palms. Seared, bleeding, branded. Two ancient symbols had been scorched into his flesh like molten iron, their edges raw and blackened, steam still rising faintly from where the blood mixed with the arcane burn. And Leo recognized the text instantly. Thief. He didn't need a translator to tell him what it was. He knew the language of the ancients and he knew what it meant. So the heat wasn't just from the metal, Leo whispered, his voice low now, his lips twitching in a smile that was somewhere between awe and dread. It was a curse, a mark, a branding spell left by Zonrock himself, so that no matter who stole the origin metal, they would never be able to hide. Fuck, if I was still in that world, this mark would have made sure there was nowhere left to run, no crevice dark enough, no cave deep enough, no spell strong enough to mask me. It was a death sentence. Delayed only by distance. He winced, sucking in a breath through his teeth as he wiped the blood from his palms with the edge of his coat, watching how the symbols glowed faintly, as if still alive, still watching. But he didn't flinch. He reached into his storage ring with practiced ease, and pulled out a healing potion, uncorking it with his teeth and gulping it down in one go, the smooth taste refreshing him. Glug. Gulp. The blue aura of joy and relief pulsed from within him, at this moment, as he truly felt the happiest and most accomplished he had ever felt in a long time, right at this moment. I did it. I am the fucking man, he told himself, as he relaxed his back and steadied his breathing. Then, in that single, suspended moment where no one was trying to kill him, where he wasn't bleeding from a dozen places, where he wasn't calculating his odds of survival every second, Leo smiled. Truly smiled. Because against all odds, he'd done it. He had stolen from a god. He had broken through a time-frozen fortress. He had lived. And that meant only one thing. He was one step closer. One step closer to reuniting with his family. One step closer to getting his old life back together. Ha, ha ha ha, he chuckled internally, as this time the laughter did not originate from madness but rather hope. Hope for a better future. Hope that made the blue aura around him burn brighter than the sun. Timeless Assassin, Volume 4. The Dragon's Legacy. Dash 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 dash. In the age before records, before empires and a universal common language, there existed only the prime forges, planets where raw mana bloomed, and the rules of reality bent easily under claw and flame. And among the horrors that ruled these early stars, none were feared more than Multheric, the devourer of suns, the destroyer of galaxies, and the one the old ones called the First Flame. He was one of the first 12 beast gods. A force to be reckoned with. A will born of fire and destruction, whose wings eclipsed moons and whose breath reduced thriving planets into barren wastelands of scorched stone and bone dust. Over 300 inhabited worlds fell under his shadow in a single year when he went on his mad rampage. And from his terrible spine, 1,000 eggs hatched, his children. Dragons. All of them cruel. All of them immeasurably powerful. They spread across the galaxies like locusts, fighting, killing, corrupting, ruling with talons soaked in the blood of billions. Not one of them showed mercy. Not one of them knew compassion. Until the day a single human said no. That human was Thalan Rieros, the first king of Ixtal, a mortal born in the Ash years, when the universe had forgotten what peace even looked like. He did not wield divine power. He did not ride a mythical beast. He was not chosen by rival gods or fate or prophecy. He was just a man. But he was a man who killed a god's son. The 204th child of Multheric, Sitharion the Red Death, came to Ixtal with fire in his lungs and hunger in his eyes. But he did not leave. Thalan challenged him alone, not for power, not for glory, but to protect his people. And somehow, someway, he won. The skies of Ixtal were lit with Sitharion's dying breath, and the whole universe changed that day. For what started with a single act of rebellion, a single death of one of the god spawns, ended years later, when all 12 ancient beast gods were defeated and their souls banished. When the common people started to call Thalan the Dragon Slayer, the human king only smiled and said, "Tyrants can never be dragons. A dragon is a noble creature. One who hunts only what he must to survive. And guards the world he lives upon. Multheric and his kin are not dragons. They are beasts, maddened by power. Nothing more. I am hence not a dragon slayer, I'm just a man standing up to evil, like any true dragon would." His words spread across the lands like a healing wind. And slowly, the word, dragon, that was once spoken only in fear, became a symbol of something else. Hope. The people began calling him the Dragon King. Not because he was part dragon. But because he defied them. Because he was something better. As his name and legacy became forever ingrained in Ixtal's memory. Dash 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 dash. Many centuries later, when the cult of Ascension was first established in Ixtal, its founder chose not to worship Multheric, but to honor Thalan's spirit, taking on the title of Dragon, not as a claim to power, but as a promise. A promise to rule the sect as the noble beast that Thalon described. To only take as much as they needed, and to protect the land they were born on. And so, the title of Dragon became inspirational for the believers of the cult, who over the years added many cultural and religious beliefs to the word. In the modern day, the cult names the candidates that can carry the legacy of the timeless assassin as Dragon. However, traditionally, it was a title meant for the sect's patriarch. And its historic origin means, a leader who brings hope. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, excerpt from, The Origin of the Dragon, Sacred Histories of the Cult of Ascension. Transcribed and preserved by Loremaster Rinvek, 3rd Howlmaster of Ixtal, year 0004. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Meanwhile, Planet Juxta, first night of the siege. The lights were off in the city of Greymount. Street lamps lay dormant like hollow bones, windows wore blackout sheaths, and even the glow panels of the rich had gone dead. On Juxta, under siege from the righteous faction's orbital fleet, it was forbidden for any home to show light bright enough to be seen from space. So they returned to older things, like oil lamps, and glowstones, whose glow was bright enough to see, but not enough to shine. No, mother. I don't want to go to sleep. I want to go fight the war with my father. An innocent child, no older than 6, complained in a common house, as his mother lovingly stroked his head and tried to convince him to sleep. You can't go to war yet, Terry, you're too tiny to fight. If you want to go to war, you must eat well, sleep lots and grow up to become big and strong. Only then will I let you go, the mother replied, pulling the blanket over her son's chin as she tried to coax him to sleep. Mother, he whispered, his voice heavier now. If we had found the next dragon, would we still be scared of the righteous faction? He asked innocently, as at his question, his mother stilled, just for a breath. Then she smiled again, and pulled the blanket tighter. No, little Terry, she said softly. If the dragon had risen, this war would already be over. The boy blinked, uncertain. But why? Because the dragon is not a soldier, she said. He is a storm. And storms don't fight, they wash things away. The child's gaze flicked to the flame of the only oil lamp in the room. Do you think he will rise again soon? He asked. The next dragon. I do, she answered without hesitation. I believe in him with every breath I take. Your father is unlucky to be born in a time where he could neither serve Lord Noah, because he was too young back when the Lord died. And will likely be too old to serve the next dragon, whoever that is. But you, young Terry, you might be fortunate enough to join the next dragon's army, she said with pride, as she stroked her son's head. We the Astrids have always supported the dragon. It runs in our blood, and I know that someday you will do so too. The mother said with finality, as her son smiled and closed his eyes. The next dragon, do you think he would want someone like me in his army? The kid asked, as his mother chuckled at the question, her eyes moist. I think, she whispered, if you eat well and grow tall and strong, he might just recruit you personally, young Terry. He yawned. I will serve the next dragon, mother. I will make our family proud when I grow up. She kissed his forehead. I know you will, my boy. I know you will. You're a believer, just like your father and his father before him, she said, a soft smile breaking her lips, as she finally watched him drift asleep. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, Leo's apartment, 1 day later. After returning to Twin Fang Planet, Leo did not rush to report the success of his mission. Instead, he made his way straight to his apartment, choosing to isolate himself from the outside world in order to sit down and truly think things through. His time in the time-stilled world had been enlightening in many ways, but if there was one lesson that had etched itself deepest into his bones, it was to trust his own gut, even when what it said seemed to be far-fetched or unlikely to be true. His instincts, sharpened by years of survival and forged through countless battles, was often more reliable than any logic or instruction manual ever could be, and currently it raised some important questions that he never thought about before. Why do the Black Serpents want the origin metal? What makes it so valuable that Zonrock, a being dead for thousands of years, still stirs at the mere thought of it being stolen? The questions burned in his mind as he walked through the quieter lanes of the outer ring, back towards his apartment. Thud. FSSHHH. The first thing he did after closing the door behind him was take a long, scalding shower. The steaming water spilled over his tense muscles, tracing the remnants of bruises and shallow cuts, cleansing the dirt and the lingering taint of the time-stilled world, as it allowed him to feel fresher once that awful smell of stink finally washed off his body. And yet, even within the comfort of a hot shower, Leo clung to his paranoia. His spatial ring and pouch, both remained strapped to him the entire time, as he did not let them out of sight even for a second, even within the locked walls of his own apartment. Once he stepped out, body clean but mind burdened, he pulled on a pair of dark training slacks and dropped onto the edge of his soft, high-density mattress, the bed dipping slightly under his weight, as his mind kicked into full gear. Well, I can't take too long to report the mission's success. Delaying would only raise questions and might make me look suspicious. His brows furrowed as he rested his elbows on his knees, fingers steepled in front of him. If he took too long to report the mission's success, the higher-ups could get suspicious of him and might try to silence him through underhanded tactics, as when items of such value were involved, it was not unusual to be backstabbed. He needed to have a foolproof story, and for that to happen, he needed to report the success of the mission within a few hours of his return, giving him very little time to think about other moves. Giving up something that could be worth more than the gold they're offering would be a stupid choice. Instinct tells me that this metal block might be worth a hell of a lot more than the 6.5 billion they're offering. His eyes drifted toward the satchel sitting near the foot of the bed. But what if I only gave half? What if I handed over one of the 2 ingots I recovered? The mission brief only asked me to retrieve origin metal. It never specified a quantity. The idea settled in his chest like a stone, and slowly, that weight became stability. If I can receive the same reward by offering just 1 block, while keeping the other to investigate later, why shouldn't I? The logic felt sound and harmless enough, as after thinking about it some more, Leo decided to hand over half the metal and report the success of the mission, while keeping the second half for himself to research its value later. If I trusted the cult, maybe I'd hand over the metal to them and ask them to reward me fairly, he muttered, leaning back, voice dripping with quiet cynicism. But I don't trust them. His jaw tightened at the thought. The bastards have tried to kill me twice now. His memories spiraled back. The attempt at the Grand Arena. The ambush by Carl inside the time-stilled world. 2 separate operatives from the same so-called organization of higher ascension had tried to end his life, and he had no intention of forgiving that. Whether they had known who he truly was didn't matter. The simple fact that it happened, twice, was enough to cast deep shadows over the cult's structure. If they couldn't even coordinate internally to protect their own asset, then what hope did they have in the greater scheme of things? If the one grooming him had to keep his identity hidden from the other higher-ups, then that alone revealed a terrifying truth. The cult of Ascension was not a unified organization. It was fractured. And Leo had no intention of blindly putting his faith into something that couldn't even manage its own internal feuds. Yes, I think that the best course of action is to not contact the cult for now. I'll contact Faye after I've reported the success of this mission to the Black Serpents and secured my opportunity to enter their treasure vault. Leo concluded, as he put on a fresh pair of guild robes and headed out. But not directly towards the mission's center, as he went to the merchant's district first. Twin Fang Planet, Merchant's District, Orange Panther's Store. The Panther's Store branch shopkeeper was overjoyed to meet Leo when he walked into the store, as he smiled brightly and rushed towards the door to greet him near the entrance. Mr. Skyshard, you're alive and well. I am most relieved, the shopkeeper said, as he gestured for Leo to enter the store with a big smile on his face. We were all very worried when we found out that an evil cult operative had snuck into your team. But I'm glad to see that you're okay. The shopkeeper said, as Leo's eyes widened in surprise as to how common the news of Carl's real identity was on Twin Fang Planet. Yes, I was lucky to survive the cult bastard. Leo replied nonchalantly, as the shopkeeper nodded and rubbed his palms in delight. Your streak of good luck continues, Mr. Skyshard, because as promised, I not only negotiated a sale price of 50 million for your formula, but I also went on and negotiated your royalty split, increasing it from 10 to 15% on all future sales. The shopkeeper said proudly, as Leo quietly nodded in approval. Well done. You have truly earned your commission on this deal, as well as the extra 1% I promised you on top, Leo said with a soft smile, as the shopkeeper humbly bowed in acceptance, before passing over to him the signed papers of his new agreement. Leo gave the papers a once-over, before storing them below his armpit, as he leaned over and asked the shopkeeper a question in a hushed tone. Say I want to send something securely over the galaxy. Something like the original formula to this poison, so that in case someday I die abruptly due to a money-related dispute, the poison formula can still be held by my confidants. How would I do it? He inquired, as the shopkeeper's eyes widened in surprise, but he did not look too aghast. I see you're a very careful man, Mr. Skyshard, I can respect that. Well, in that case, I would go to the United Carrier Services and tell them to discreetly deliver a package, which I would submit well sealed. They are known for their professionalism and will deliver it at the fastest speed, the shopkeeper advised as Leo nodded and thanked him before leaving the store. He went to the United Carriers store next, where he mailed one of the 2 origin metal ingots, alongside a blank check for 10 million megapixels, to a certain Chaosbringer, on planet Terra Nova. Knowing full well, that if there was one man that could keep it safe with his wits and glib tongue, it was that man. Twin Fang Planet, Merchants District, 45 minutes later. After leaving the United Carriers store, Leo walked into a modest-looking item shop next, that was tucked between a weapons boutique and a mana accessories outlet. The walls inside were lined with gear for both rookie assassins and seasoned killers, such as boots that nullified footsteps, protective bracelets that could deflect low-grade spells, and masks designed to blur facial features. Leo's eyes settled on a plain black concealment mask near the center shelf. It had no design, no flair, just a matte, contoured surface with a smooth texture and a built-in mana dampener that would interfere with facial recognition attempts. How much? He asked the shopkeeper. 32,000 MP, the woman replied, not bothering to pitch it, as the item pretty much sold itself. Leo paid without haggling, then turned around and slid the mask onto his face just as he stepped outside. As being the cautious man that he now was, he knew better than to walk into the missions hall to claim his 6.5 billion megapixels reward while openly displaying his face. Twin Fang Planet, Black Serpent's Guild Missions Hall. The mission hall bustled with activity as usual, with there being a sizable crowd gathered just underneath the mission postings wall, as they searched for that next lucrative mission to accept. Assassins of every kind and speciality moved about in cliques, their dark robes brushing past one another, the energy tense but disciplined. As Leo walked silently between them, he made no announcement, no declaration. Instead, his masked figure strolled directly to the center of the hall, where the towering golden plaque still hung untouched on the main board. It shimmered faintly in the artificial lighting, radiating an aura of importance. This was no standard assignment. This was the crown jewel of all the current listings. Without a word, Leo reached out and pulled it down. The clang of metal echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. Conversations halted. Heads turned. In seconds, the idle murmur turned into a low roar. Wait, did he just take the golden plaque? That's the mission from the time-stilled world. The one that Gary said was suicidal to attempt. Who is that guy? Is he alone? Where's his team? Hey buddy, you know you can only take it down if the mission's complete, right? The wave of voices rose quickly as more assassins gathered, their curiosity mingled with disbelief. Some looked shocked. Others were already suspicious. But Leo ignored all of it. He didn't slow his pace. He walked with a calm certainty through the noise and straight to the clerk's desk, where without hesitation, he placed the plaque on the table, and peered straight into the clerk's surprised eyes. "I have completed the mission," he said in a voice muffled slightly by the mask. "You can verify it in a private room, after which I want to discuss my rewards." The clerk, a young woman who had clearly not expected this kind of chaos during her shift, blinked at him in horror. Her eyes darted to the golden plaque. Then to Leo. Then back again. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the communication crystal on her desk and raised it to her mouth. "Head supervisor," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have a situation. A masked man just submitted the golden mission plaque for verification. Says it's completed. He's requesting immediate processing." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes, that mission. The one from the time-stilled world." Leo said nothing as she continued to talk, his stance unmoving, his gaze sharp behind the blackened mask, as the crowd behind him continued to buzz with feverish speculation. "No, seriously, who is that guy? He's clearly no stronger than a Grandmaster. Did he really complete the mission? Why is he hiding his identity if he really completed the mission? Does he not want the glory for completing it? He's probably hiding his identity because he's not a complete idiot. Imagine showing your face to a room full of killers who now know that you're richer than the Vice Guildmaster, but don't have the strength to protect that wealth. He's smart. I'll give him that, but I still doubt that he really completed the mission." The people behind him muttered, as soon a breathless supervisor stumbled into the room, sweat beads rolling down his forehead. "Sir, are you the one who completed the mission?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief, as Leo merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Please follow me, the Vice Guildmaster has requested to see you in his office," he said, as Leo jumped over the clerk's counter and joined the supervisor behind it, before gesturing to him to lead the way. The supervisor nervously led Leo to the headquarters building of the guild, where he put him on a private lift that ascended swiftly through the central shaft before halting at the 65th floor, right outside the Vice Guildmaster's office. "I hope I did not cause you any significant delay or inconvenience," he said before giving Leo a shallow bow, as he hastily excused himself, the doors of the elevator closing behind him with a faint hiss. Music. Leo listened to some elevator music for a few seconds, until a ding sound announced his arrival at the desired floor. Hiss. As the lift door slid open once more, Leo instinctively straightened his posture, only to be met by the intense gaze of none other than Vice Guildmaster Antonio, who stood right at the threshold of the elevator opening, with his arms folded and a single eyebrow raised in suspicion. Leo's heart skipped a beat. For a brief second, it felt as if his mask was paper-thin, as if the concealment enchantments and mana-dampening runes did absolutely nothing against the man's sharp gaze, as Antonio's presence radiated an authority that left no room for pretense or facade. And just as Leo feared, it became clear that the disguise had served no purpose, when Antonio finally opened his mouth, as the first words he spoke made it evident as to how useless his disguise was against beings of Antonio's level. "I was wondering which youngling had managed to complete the mission," Antonio said, his voice calm but laced with a hint of authority. "But if it's the circuit champion Leo Skyshard, then it's believable." Leo exhaled through his nose and smiled dryly beneath the mask, before pulling it off with one hand and storing it in his spatial ring in one smooth motion. "Pardon my caution, I'm a low-profile guy," he muttered, stepping off the lift and into the Vice Guildmaster's office. Antonio nodded and turned around without further comment, his long black coat fluttering slightly as he walked toward his expansive desk at the far end of the room. "Come, we have much to discuss," he said without looking back, as the reinforced glass windows behind him offered a panoramic view of the entire Twin Fang skyline, glittering with life. Leo followed without hesitation, preparing himself for whatever came next, as he knew that he was due for an intense grilling session, where any slip-up could instantly land him in pretty deep waters. Twin Fang Planet, Black Serpent's Guild Headquarters, Vice Guildmaster's Office. Antonio took his seat behind the wide office desk, fingers already gliding across the embedded crystal panel to pull up Leo's mission file, his sharp eyes scanning through the contents with quiet intensity. The air in the room was still, save for the occasional tapping sound of his fingers as he scrolled through Leo's mission data. Across from him, Leo sat with a composed expression, his posture relaxed yet alert, the calm glint in his eyes betraying no sign of fatigue or insanity, something that stood out immediately to Antonio. Antonio leaned back in his chair, one leg crossing over the other as he kept reading. Nearly a year, he murmured to himself. You've been exposed to the tainted mana of the stilled world for an entire year, yet you don't show any signs of mental breakdown. Your mental fortitude must be elite level. He tapped the table lightly, the sound soft but deliberate. Usually when we have candidates return from the time-stilled world after a prolonged stay of 180 to 200 days, they show signs of schizophrenia and have trouble sleeping at night. However, you seem to be fine. His eyes returned to Leo. Either you're made of sterner stuff than the rest, or you're hiding some secret that I don't know. Leo said nothing, offering only the faintest shrug of acknowledgement, neither confirming nor denying. Antonio's gaze lowered as he read further, pausing at a section flagged in red. Team member, Karl Maxtern. Threat level, high. Affiliation, evil cult. Remarks, capture immediately if returns. The Vice Guildmaster's expression didn't shift. He read it, digested it, then closed the panel with a flick of his wrist, as he chose not to comment on it as of yet. Instead, he leaned forward, folding his hands together as his voice dropped to a more focused tone. So, let's see it. Where is the origin metal? Leo, anticipating the request, nodded once and reached into his spatial ring as he pulled out the block of origin metal from within and placed it on the table with a soft thud. Antonio's eyes narrowed. Even without touching it, even without scanning it, he could feel it. The origin metal, heavy, pure, saturated in energy older than most planets in the current galactic cycle. But he didn't reach for it. Please, he said, voice cool but unmistakably firm, empty both your spatial ring and pouch. Leo stiffened ever so slightly. There was no aggression in Antonio's tone, but the implication was clear: complete transparency, or complete mistrust. A long second passed before Leo nodded. He unclasped his ring and pouch, emptied both across the desk in full view, as small clusters of objects tumbled onto the table's smooth surface. Food ration packets, mana potions, mana stones, night goggles, thick ropes, glowstones, a fire starter kit, a handful of antique scrolls from the Conclave, and a few stolen frost grenades. But there was no additional metal to be found inside, or nothing alarming that would flag him as a threat. Antonio eyed the spread, his fingers tracing lazy circles in the air as a thin sweep of violet mana pulsed from his palm and drifted across the objects, scanning for hidden enchantments or cloaked items. Nothing flickered. No false readings. After a few seconds, he gave a single nod and slid the storage ring and pouch back across the table toward Leo. Thank you for your cooperation, he said quietly. Then, and only then, did he finally allow himself to touch the origin metal, as he picked it up with surprising ease and held it between his palms as he pulled it closer to his eye for inspection. For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes focused only on the strange material in his grasp, as a frown slowly formed on his brow. I can see traces of enchantment on this, he said, as Leo nodded, and showed the burn marks on his palm. As soon as I grabbed it, the metal seared a burn mark into my skin in some ancient language I can't read. I assume it was enchanted to protect from theft, Leo replied, as Antonio took a close look at his palms before finally nodding, seemingly satisfied with his reply. So far, the interview had gone smoothly for Leo. However, that was only because of his foresight to already ship the metal before coming here to claim his rewards, as if he did not take that step, then he would have been busted when Antonio asked to check his ring and pouch. This guy is thorough, Leo thought internally, as he could feel the pressure rising, as Antonio increased his scrutiny. The mana stones you retrieved from the time-stilled world still exhibit traces of soft corruption, likely a result of prolonged exposure to the tainted mana in that environment. So yes, I believe you have indeed been there, Antonio said, inspecting the stones placed on the table carefully. The guild records also confirm your entry and return. He leaned back in his chair, his expression turning more serious. That said, belief alone is not enough. His tone grew firmer. I need a complete account of what happened to you and your team inside the time-stilled world. Only then will I mark the mission as completed and authorize your reward. He folded his arms and fixed his eyes on Leo. Start from the beginning. Tell me how you lost your team members or became separated from them. Explain what measures you took to protect your mind from the world's corruption. Describe how you identified the evil cult operative and how you dealt with him. And finally, explain how you managed to recover the origin metal and make it out alive. His voice was calm but unyielding. Do not leave anything out. Take your time and walk me through everything. Leo took a slow breath. He had anticipated this exact moment and prepared his story well in advance. What he shared was truthful for the most part, with only one omission, as he said nothing about stumbling upon the conclave or his meeting with Multheric. As that was the one part, he chose to keep to himself. Antonio listened to the entire recounting with rapt attention, occasionally cutting in with pointed questions that Leo answered with precision and composure. By the time the tale drew to a close, even the seasoned vice guildmaster found himself stunned, momentarily speechless by the sheer scale of adversity Leo had to overcome. I still can't believe you managed to defeat a transcendent-level cult operative while only being a Grand Master, Antonio finally said, his voice low with a mix of awe and disbelief. There are very few warriors in the universe who could have pulled that off. His tone, which had started with scrutiny and measured skepticism, now carried a distinct note of respect. Leo's story had been airtight, detailed, coherent, and devoid of exaggeration. It was the kind of account that demanded belief not just for what was said, but for how it was said. I'll admit, if there weren't eyewitnesses to corroborate your claims, I'd probably have dismissed most of it as bravado, Antonio said, leaning back in his chair. But still, I will be confirming everything. It's standard procedure. Of course, Leo replied smoothly, nodding once. Please do. I've never had a reason to boast, nor the need to embellish. Antonio gave a small nod of approval. Come with me, he said, rising to his feet. Warriors of your rank don't usually get an audience with the guildmaster himself, but I think an exception is warranted. He gestured toward the door. Let's hand-deliver this medal to him. I suspect Dupravel will be very interested in meeting you. With that, the two stepped into the private lift once more, ascending toward floor 72, the level reserved for the guildmaster's personal office. Black Serpent's Guild headquarters, en route to Guildmaster's office, floor 72. The private lift music played quietly as it ascended, the blue floor indicator above the doors ticking upward at a steady pace. Antonio stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the polished metal doors as he spoke without turning. Before we go in, he said, voice lower than usual, I'd like to ask you to excuse the guildmaster's behavior. He's dealing with some personal matters. Leo arched an eyebrow at the odd disclaimer, but said nothing more than a curt nod. Ding! Asterisk. The lift doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Leo stepped forward, and froze. The office beyond was nothing like he had expected. There, squatting barefoot on top of the reinforced desk like a beast perched, sat Monarch Dupravel Nuna, Guildmaster of the Black Serpents. His ragged cloak hung off his shoulders like a loose animal hide, while his wild, matted hair fell around his face in greasy tangles. Between his teeth was the nod stump of what used to be a pencil, its splinters lining the corners of his cracked lips. His eyes, sunken, bloodshot, and twitching locked onto Leo the moment he appeared. Grr. The sound wasn't a greeting. It wasn't even speech. It was a low, guttural warning, half growl, half animal instinct. Leo stiffened instinctively, every trained fiber in his body tightening, as his brain tried to reconcile the overwhelming presence of power that radiated from this creature with the image of a broken man. But before he could react further, Antonio stepped forward sharply. Dupravel. Behave. His tone cut through the room like a whip crack. This boy brought back the origin medal you wanted so badly. He's the one who completed your mission. He's the reason that this guild will probably not go to shit. So you better treat him with respect. For a long, tense moment, Dupravel didn't move. Then, with the clumsy grace of something feral remembering how to be human, he slid off the desk and dropped into his chair. His bones creaked. His posture remained hunched, but his breathing slowed. As for the first time, he looked at Leo, not as a threat or a mere insect, but as a fellow human. His eyes narrowed, focusing, searching, as he leaned forward and muttered. You the one, who bring, my blood's ticket home. Leo stepped forward, keeping his expression calm, his hands relaxed by his sides. Yes, he said quietly. I'm the one who brought it back. Dupravel squinted, as if the words didn't quite register until they rolled around his head a few more seconds. Then his eyes twitched. How you get past, crazy violet-eyed priest? He asked, each word spoken like gravel grinding through his throat. However, Leo didn't falter at the question. I was too weak for the priest to bother with killing me, he replied honestly, as a low, choking sound rumbled in Dupravel's throat, a noise that could have been laughter, or the start of another breakdown. See this, he instructed, as he leaned back and began clawing at the folds of his robe until his hand found the tear in his chest wrap. Ah! With a slow grunt, he pulled the fabric aside, to reveal a gnarled, jagged scar that was nearly a foot long and ran diagonally across his ribcage, the flesh still faintly discolored with lingering curse marks. Crazy priest team up with silver hero, to slash my chest, he muttered, tapping the scar with a grim sort of pride. I barely survive. Leo gave a slow nod. There was no disbelief in his eyes, only understanding, as having faced the two himself, he knew exactly how powerful they really were. Antonio, who had remained respectfully silent, stepped forward now and placed the block of origin metal onto the table between them. It gave a low metallic thud as it touched the desk, as Dupravel's hand immediately snapped forward to grab it. Clutching it like a starving man clutching bread, the guildmaster stared down at the origin metal block with wide, fevered eyes. His fingers trembling, as his long, untrimmed nails scratched softly against its surface. For a few seconds, the room was silent again, the gravity of the moment unbroken. Until a few seconds later, when Dupravel finally looked up. Good job, kid, he croaked. I now forgive you for beating my son at the finals. He turned his head just enough to nod toward Antonio. Reward him. Leo bowed with practiced grace, his voice composed. I'm honored by your words, Guildmaster. And I accept the grace. Antonio didn't speak, but the faint upward twitch of his lips was the closest thing to a smile Leo had seen from the man since they began talking. Dupravel, meanwhile, continued to cradle the origin medal against his chest, rocking slightly in his chair like a lunatic soothing a child. I told you, Antonio, he mumbled, almost smugly. This mission, not impossible. Ants like him, can complete it. Antonio's smile widened just a touch more as he folded his arms. Perhaps you haven't gone completely senile after all, old friend, maybe you do have some brains left, he said under his breath, as Dupravel either didn't hear him, or chose not to respond. Instead, he kept rocking the origin medal, as the madness in his eyes flickered like dying candlelight. Leo was excused from Dupravel's office shortly after the origin medal was confirmed to be genuine, and as he made his way back through the guild headquarters, he still found it difficult to believe just how far the once enigmatic monarch had fallen. He had watched Dupravel during the interstellar circuits and knew firsthand how powerful and charismatic the man had once been. But the version he encountered today was merely a shell of that legend. If I report this to the cult, will they try to assassinate Dupravel? Leo wondered, as he let out a dry chuckle at the thought. Before parting, Antonio had informed him that whether he chose the gold reward or the item from the vault, he could collect either from the mission hall in 2 weeks, where the staff would already be briefed to expect him. That gave him a 2-week window to coordinate yet another heist, one that, in terms of difficulty, was far easier than his last. However, unlike the previous job where every element was under his control, this time he had to depend entirely on the evil cult to make the plan work, which was something that Leo did not feel confident about. I've held up my end of the bargain and found a legitimate opportunity to step inside the vault. I hope those idiots have held up their end as well and actually possess a viable method for me to steal the scroll they so desperately want. If, after everything I've done and risked, I still fail to retrieve the scroll because of the cult's incompetence or poor planning, then there would be no bigger fool than me in this entire godforsaken universe, Leo concluded bitterly, as he shook his head and began walking back toward his apartment, from where he intended to contact me and Faye without delay. Planet Vorthas, Town Hall, War Chamber, 12th Elders POV. The chamber was alive with noise. Union leaders from the ore mining guilds, alloy refineries, and missile part manufacturers all spoke at once, their voices overlapping with urgency as they discussed raw material quotas and revised timelines. At the center of it all stood the 12th Elder, listening with measured patience as he calmly negotiated production boosts and wartime cooperation without compromising planetary morale. We will double the output in Sector 7, but I want hazard pay implemented immediately. We are not beasts. We are builders, the ore mining union leader said firmly, earning a round of nods and muttered agreements from the gathered representatives. What are your thoughts on this 12th Elder? Someone asked, when suddenly a soft buzzing sound rang across the chamber. *BZZZT. BZZZZZ. The hum started low, but it grew sharp and violent, as the 12th Elder's private communication crystal vibrated against his belt with enough intensity to draw every eye in the room. I was not supposed to get any communication requests today, the 12th Elder thought, as he glanced down towards his belt and looked at the small image being projected upon it. It's Mu Fan, he realized, as his expression shifted instantly. Excuse me, this matter cannot wait, he said, his voice colder now, authority layered with urgency, as without another word, he turned and strode into the adjacent antechamber, sealing the soundproof door behind him with a wave of his hand. Thud. Private room, communication link established. What is it? Noir said, his voice clipped. You weren't scheduled to contact me today. There was a hitch on the other end, then Mu Fan's voice came through, breathless, urgent, and almost disbelieving. He's done it. 12th Elder, Leo has found a way to enter the Black Serpent's treasury vault. He's now asking for our help to plan the heist. He came through. Just like you said he would. He's already done it. Silence followed. A long one. Noir's pupils contracted, his knuckles whitening around the edge of the communication crystal. Impossible. He took a step back, as if the revelation had landed like a blow to his chest. It hasn't even been 6 weeks since we assigned him the mission, and he's cracked open a path that we were not able to breach in over 30 years. His mind surged with disbelief, then steadied, overtaken by the slow, unmistakable rhythm of rising awe. That's the quality of a true dragon. A rare smile spread across his lips, unusual, but unmistakably real. The dragon, as the legend said, was the one who brought light where none existed, who made the impossible bend, and turned despair into destiny. Noir had once believed he would never witness such a figure again, not after Noah died. But Leo Skyshard was beginning to prove him wrong. Are you certain? He asked, his voice cracking slightly, as he became unable to suppress the excitement in his pitch. How did he do it? You're sure it's not a trap? For the first time in decades, the carefully composed facade of the 12th Elder, the calm, stoic tactician, was cracking, revealing the spark of something far more dangerous beneath. Hope that the boy he decided to groom on a long shot was turning out to become the savior his people needed. No, it's not a trap. He apparently completed a really difficult mission for the Serpents and has earned the right to enter the vault and pick an item of his choosing as the reward. He's gonna get the chance to enter in 2 weeks, and he's seeking our help to smuggle the scroll out without being killed, Fan said with enthusiasm, as Noir fell silent yet again. His gaze remained fixed on the wall in front, his fingers slowly curling into a fist as he processed the information. Unbelievable, he whispered, almost to himself. This boy, he's exceeding even the wildest expectations I set for him. His breath caught in his throat, mind torn between awe and the cold, calculating realization of what this breakthrough could mean for the cult as a whole and for Leo's destiny. With the council having already agreed to name him Dragon if he brings back the scroll, this could almost guarantee his selection as the next dragon. Step. He paced once, then again, before stopping mid-step. Tell him, he said slowly, his voice regaining its edge of command, he doesn't need to perform any complicated heist or extraction. He turned toward the crystal, his eyes sharp and brimming with purpose. All he needs to do is smuggle a dimensional portal point into the vault and secure it in a fixed, undisturbed spot. He paused to let the gravity of the plan sink in. If he can manage that, the cult operatives will handle the rest. We'll initiate a remote portal sync and storm the vault in one clean, coordinated sweep, where we loot everything inside, from the scroll, the relics, the assets, we'll take everything within 20 minutes. His fingers tapped against his thigh, calculating the variables. But make sure he understands, this will burn his identity as a righteous faction citizen permanently. Once that portal goes live, there will be no denying his involvement. Noir's voice grew colder now, more precise. He must get to safety and enter cult territory before we trigger the portal, because, if we succeed, the Black Serpents will issue a Black Rank mission under his name almost immediately. There won't be a single Black Serpent operative who won't take the mission of finding and killing him. As for the rest of his life, he will live as the most wanted man in the universe. Noir exhaled, as he steadied himself. Make sure he's ready for the consequences. Make sure that he understands that by taking this mission, he's going to turn 90% of the universe into his permanent enemy. And that, his only option would be to stay aligned with the cult from then on, Noir instructed, as Fan nodded from the other end. Understood, Elder, she said with conviction as Noir ended the line, his hands trembling with excitement, as he rushed out of the room to go find a dimensional portal point at once. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, Leo's apartment. The dim glow of a single mana lamp lit the room, as Leo reclined on his bed, one arm lazily folded behind his head while the other held up his personal communication crystal. The soft hum of the crystal vibrated gently against his palm as Mu Fan's projection flickered to life, her face beaming with barely contained excitement. I have some good news, she said breathlessly, you're going to be taken in. After this mission, you don't need to keep living with the enemy. You'll officially become one of us. Leo nodded without emotion, his expression unreadable, as if Fan's words carried the weight of a casual weather report to him and nothing more. And the best part, you don't have to steal anything yourself. All you need to do is drop the dimensional portal point somewhere inside the vault. Once it's active, the cult will handle the rest. She grinned. But Leo didn't. Respectfully, Fan, Leo said, his voice like glass, cool, sharp, and with the threat of shatter. I don't trust a single one of your operatives to complete this mission. Her smile faltered. And I certainly don't trust the cult to honor its word and leave my family unharmed after I deliver the scroll you're so obsessed with. The projection flickered slightly, the expression on Mu Fan's face now stiff with tension. You don't trust us to keep our promise. No, Leo answered, immediately and unapologetically. The room fell into silence, heavy and pointed. You know exactly what this is, he continued, sitting upright now, his tone darkening. You've manipulated me from the start. Not as an ally, not as a chosen agent, but as a tool. A weapon you thought you could aim. And I played along, because I had no power. He leaned forward, voice quiet but venomous. You stole my memories, you threatened me with the safety of my family to do your bidding, and you forced me to join Rodova and the Black Serpents, but that streak of you making unilateral decisions for my life ends today. Mu Fan looked stunned, as if she hadn't expected Leo to say such harsh words out of the blue, at least not with this much heat behind it. If you want that portal placed, if you want that scroll retrieved, then these are my terms. He raised 3 fingers. First, I want my family moved to whatever planet you plan on relocating me to. I want them to have a mansion to live. Full security detail. And a live video call with all of them, healthy, safe, and sane, before the 2 weeks are up. As I will not carry on with the mission before confirming that they are indeed alive and unharmed. Second, he continued, you're going to retrieve my pet, Dumpy. He's on planet Palkia as far as I can recall, in a universal government grooming facility. And I don't care if you have to steal him, or burn the facility down. I don't care if it's possible or not possible for you to retrieve him on such short notice. The fact of the matter is, no Dumpy means no scroll. Mu Fan opened her mouth, but Leo cut her off with a raised hand. Third, I want you to access the Lost Heroes program operated by the Universal Government, and recreate my master, Ben. The cybernetic copy, the one from the game logs, with his memories about our interactions intact. Reconstruct him. I want him there too, standing beside my mother and Dumpy when I speak to them. Not a minute later. He lowered his hand. If all 3 conditions are not met within the next 14 days, this deal is dead. I won't plant anything. I will enter the vault and pick whatever I want from inside it, and you will lose your chance to get the scroll, forever. And after that, you can tell your cult to pack up their dreams of ever getting it back. He stood up slowly, walking to the small window in his apartment, as he looked out at the street below with dead eyes. Because the days where I played the role of the obedient puppet are over. I don't work for you, Fan. I don't serve your cause. If you want what I have, then meet my price. Mu Fan remained frozen, the light in her expression extinguished, her excitement gutted by the sudden, brutal clarity in Leo's voice. For the first time, she realized something critical. By suppressing Leo's autonomy and deceiving him during the formative stages of his growth, the cult hadn't forged loyalty in his heart, but had rather sown distrust. Fan had always believed that their actions were necessary, that every manipulation they did was justified in the name of helping Leo evolve into a powerful dragon candidate. But now, with even a sliver of freedom back in his life, Leo no longer viewed the cult as his saviors. He viewed them as manipulators. And the loyalty they had hoped to cultivate had been replaced by quiet, simmering suspicion. Just so you know, this is not an us versus you scenario. The cult is your future home. And we are your extended family. We don't mean to deceive or manipulate you. Nor do we wish to bring harm to your family. I will forward your demands to the elder I report to. But do know that your words today have greatly saddened me. We are not your enemies, Leo. You don't need to watch your back against us, Fan said before disconnecting the call, as Leo simply scoffed at her last words. Woman, I couldn't care less if you feel saddened. You have brought this on yourself, he muttered, shaking his head, as he couldn't believe that Mu Fan had thrown such a childish barb before leaving. Thud. He tossed the communication crystal aside, letting it clatter onto the bed without a second glance. For a few seconds, the room was silent again. Not out of peace, but because Leo was thinking. He had finally said it, drawn a line that couldn't be erased. And it felt right. Because if he didn't take control of his own fate now, then when would he? After the next forced mission. After the next betrayal. He had been patient, obedient, cooperative, but none of those things had earned him honesty from the cult. Or a promise to not harm his family anymore. Only more manipulation. So from now on, if the cult wanted anything from him, they would have to pay for it in full. Because while Leo knew he'd soon be forced to live among cult operatives, branded a fugitive by 90% of the universe, he was determined to live that life on his own terms. As then, at least the choices leading to his rise or downfall would be his own, and not something forced upon him by someone else. Sorry Fan, but there will be no more free obedience. No more silent suffering. Just business, Leo thought, as he cracked his knuckles and rolled his shoulders. Because if the cost of looking out for himself was looking cruel in other people's eyes, then he was ready to pay it. He wasn't here to be liked. His priority was his own survival and his family, and if others felt offended because of it, then he really did not have any fucks left to spare anymore. Meanwhile, Planet Terra Nova, Outer Slums, Guild Office of The Uprising. The Uprising had once been a powerhouse, an influential guild boasting hundreds of thousands of loyal members. But the past few years had not been kind to it. Forced to abandon their prime headquarters in the city center, they relocated to the slums, unable to keep up with the soaring rent prices. Now, their guild hall creaked louder than its members' morale. The ceiling groaned with every breeze, and the warped wooden floorboards bowed beneath even the lightest step. The air reeked of rust and damp timber, a scent that lingered like failure. Empty mission boards lined the peeling walls, flanked by faded banners that once inspired pride but now served only as quiet reminders of a forgotten glory. The guild's decline was not just in location, but also in spirit, in purpose, and in the very heartbeat of the guild itself. "No, Sam, I don't think you understand," a guild member standing in the missions hall said, as he shook his head and tried to explain the reality to his brainwashed friend. "I heard from Jason that it's over. Another week, maybe 2. If we don't find a way to make at least 3 million MP, we won't have funds to repay the loan sharks, renew the guild license, or to pay rent for this damn forsaken place. The rival guilds are already mocking us, calling us zealots without a leader. Delusional idiots worshipping a ghost. They think the boss is never coming back. They say that Chaosbringer is delusional, and that the boss has long outgrown us. According to them, we will be unable to pay our debts soon, and then all our assets will be seized by loan sharks, and our core management team will be forced into manual labor to repay their loans," he argued, as a tear escaped the edge of his eyes. Things were truly tough for the uprising right now. However, their faith in the boss returning someday remained unshaken. "Jason knows nothing. Lord Boss will return someday. And once he does, we will prove him wrong," Sam replied, as he continued to remain as delusional as ever. Dash 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 dash. In the adjacent room, Chaosbringer slouched behind his cracked mahogany desk, a half-empty bottle of sour berry liqueur swaying gently in his perfectly manicured fingers. His long, shimmering nails, once painted with radiant hues of pride, were chipped now. His once fiery eyes stared blankly at the peeling wall in front of him as he wondered what desperate move he would be forced to make next. The Sophia girl and her Alcazar family are relentless. They keep offering more money every month, trying to get me to sell everything I know about my lord, Chaosbringer thought, exhaling a heavy sigh. 5 million MP. That was the last offer they had given him to spill the truth. And still, he had turned it down. "I will never sell information about my lord. But I do need money to keep the guild alive," he admitted silently, taking another slow sip of his drink, as suddenly, the door to his office slammed open with a sharp crash. Crash! A young guild courier stumbled inside, panting, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. "Leader!" the boy cried out. It's a package. A package from the boss." Chaosbringer didn't move at first. The words echoed in his head, soft at first, then louder, building until something inside him snapped back to life. "What did you just say?" he asked, as his dead eyes turned alive once more and his slouched posture automatically turned straight. "A package. From him," the courier repeated, holding up a cloth-wrapped parcel with trembling hands. "It says, the boss on the sender label." Like a man struck by lightning, Chaosbringer shot up from his seat the moment he heard those words, as his sudden rise caused his creaky chair to stumble and fall backwards. "Thud. Give it to me," he said as he lunged forward with startling fervor, snatching the parcel with both hands as though it were the final sacred relic left in a crumbling temple. "Don't touch it. Out. This is divine property, child. Be gentle," he hissed, clutching the package tightly against his chest, his voice cracking with emotion. Slamming the door shut behind him, Chaosbringer returned to his desk and placed the package down as reverently as a priest laying an offering upon an altar. "Oh holy!" he gasped aloud the moment he saw the name scrawled across the label in familiar, sharp handwriting. From the boss. The package had no return address, no seal, no hidden insignia. Just that name. That sacred, holy name. Mother of divinity, it's real, it's him, Chaosbringer mused, as he quickly unwrapped the package and checked the contents inside. As inside he found, one wrapped block of brick, one letter and a check. What did the Lord send? Chaosbringer wondered as he peeled open the letter first, fingers shaking like a storm through silk. I now remember everything. You'll hear from me soon. Until then, take care of our people and use this money wisely. Also, keep this package safe. It's very valuable for me. Greetings, the boss. Closing square bracket. Tucked beneath the note was a blank universal bank check, stamped for a total limit of 10 million MP. Chaosbringer didn't cry. He sobbed. Unashamedly. Loudly. Beautifully. He fell to his knees as the tears streamed down, smearing the little remnants of eyeliner still clinging to his lower lids. My Lord, my light, my God. He wailed, clutching the note to his chest like a lifeline. You remember me. He looked up at the rotten ceiling, lips quivering into a manic smile. He's back. He's alive. He hasn't forgotten us. He hasn't forgotten me. He twirled in place like a drunk ballerina, hugging the check against his cheek as he giggled through the tears. No more poverty. No more judgment from those damned doubters. The uprising shall rise again. He clutched the package to his chest now, rocking back and forth like a lover reunited after war. I knew it. I knew he'd return to us. I waited. I prayed. I believed. And now, my faith has been rewarded. His sobs softened into sniffles, as he ran a finger over the sharp lettering on the envelope. My Lord, of course I will keep your package safe for you. I will let no one even touch it. Still cradling the parcel like a newborn, Chaosbringer slowly rose to his feet, straightening his robe with newfound dignity. The drunken haze that had clouded his days vanished, replaced by a spark that hadn't burned in years. He walked to the cracked mirror on the far wall, wiped his tears, and began fixing his makeup with trembling hands. If the world doubted before, let them doubt now, he whispered, applying a fresh coat of shimmering lipstick. For the one we serve remembers us again. Then, with eyes burning bright and lips curled into a confident smile, he turned to face the door. Prepare the guild hall, he called out. Repaint the banners. Polish the floors. You Sector E slackers, clean your boots and find your spines. It's time for this guild to rise again. Planet Vorthik, the 12th Elder's POV. The 12th Elder was not amused at all when Mu Fan called him again and informed him about all the demands that Leo had made in order to complete this mission. There's an ongoing war, damn it. I don't have spare manpower to be completing pet retrieval missions for the boy. He complained, the demand already leaving a sour taste in his mouth. On one hand, he respected Leo for having the clarity to distrust the cult and for putting forward conditions that safeguarded his own interests. However, on the other hand, it annoyed him to no end that the super soldier he had groomed also came with a mind of his own, when what he really wanted was a mindless weapon that danced to orders without question. I had scheduled an emergency meeting with the First Elder today. I'm sure he won't be pleased when I inform him about this development, Noir muttered to himself, as he could already smell the lecture coming from a mile away. You must always control your assets. You must behave as their counselor and guide them in the right direction, even when they think you're wrong. He could already hear the First Elder's voice in his head, scolding him with that same old doctrine. The man was going to be pissed when he heard about Leo's demands. Noir just knew it. That same afternoon, planet Tithia. Later that afternoon, as the 12th Elder sat across from the first and began detailing Leo's success in locating a way into the Black Serpent's vault, along with the outrageous list of demands that followed, he watched the expression on the First Elder's face shift, transforming from delight to cautious scrutiny in a matter of minutes. The boy is a true talent, there's no denying it. He does have the talent to become the next dragon. But his temperament is an issue. You must understand, Lord 12th, that the only reason I'm backing Skyshard over Aegon Vare to become dragon is because I find Vare's attitude to be utterly lacking in malleability. Otherwise he too possesses sufficient talent to qualify. You must learn to control your boy, because while he will get away with his little stunt this time, if he keeps up this attitude, Then he will lose the support of the council even if he is named the next dragon, the first elder instructed as Noir nodded with his head down. Once he is within the folds of the cult, I expect him to mature and wisen up in our ways. For now what's important is that we retrieve the scroll and help him become the next dragon. Then, as far as we have his reverse scale, his family under our thumb, we can always find a way to make him fall in line, Noir said, as the first elder nodded in agreement. Go on, you have my permission to use men for my court to complete the demands the boy has put forward, but make sure that a repeat of this scenario never happens again, the first said at the end as he concluded the meeting. Dash 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 dash. Same time, Planet Juxta, Vice Cult Leader Charles. The sky had burned for 4 days straight. 4 days of relentless bombardment. 4 days of watching metal birds crash and burn before they ever touched soil. 4 days of decoy ships, empty pods, and disposable soldiers hurled at the mana shield like firewood into a furnace. Vice Cult Leader Charles stood atop the northern watchtower, arms folded, cigarette between his fingers, as he stared at the horizon, where another swarm of ships had begun their descent, yet again. They're still at it, he muttered, voice low and sharp, as the rumble of distant detonations echoed in the wind. 4 fucking days, and not a single ship higher than a glider class deployed by those bastards. You got to respect how deep their pockets run. Because at this point I'm pretty sure we have destroyed more righteous glider ships in a week than the cult has owned in its entire history, he noted, as he laughed a self-depreciating chuckle. The planet's mana shield flared again in the sky, an electric flash of divine mana peeling through another glider class, as the craft popped midair, its fragments vaporizing instantly. 76, Charles said aloud, counting the explosions. 77, 78. 79. He stopped at 82. This wave had lasted under 4 minutes. Sir. Battle report, sir. A voice came from beneath him, as Lieutenant Fred climbed up the tower, panting and coated in sweat. Sir, we've just received word from Sector E. 2 more striker pods made it through the outer curvature but burned in the upper atmosphere before touchdown. Charles didn't even look at him. He just took another drag from his cigarette. No survivors, then. Fred shook his head. None. A long silence followed, broken only by the low drone of defensive engines humming far below. Charles exhaled smoke through his nose. Lieutenant, how many ships have they sent in total since the war began? Fred hesitated. Over 60,000, sir. Charles snorted. And how many have breached the shield? Fred's lips thinned. 0. Charles turned, his black coat flaring behind him like a banner of war, his boots thudding heavily against the stone floor as he walked away from the ledge. Cheeky bastards, aren't they? Fred. They're bleeding us dry, he muttered. The mana cost to keep that shield running is astronomical. Even if we're vaporizing them like paper drones, every single pulse drains our reserves. They know we can't keep our advanced defenses active forever. Eventually, we'll be forced to shut them down, whether due to resource depletion or for maintenance. And when that day comes, they'll unleash their destroyer-class ships and heavier artillery, the ones that can actually pose a threat. They're not attacking to break us now. They're bleeding us. It's death by erosion. Fred nodded grimly. So what do we do, sir? Charles paused at the tower's edge, looking back toward the battlefield of the sky. We don't blink. That's what we do, he said. We let them waste their pilots, their ships, their resources. Let them drain themselves chasing fireworks. Then, softer, almost to himself, because the day we turn off the taps on the defense system, that's the day when hellfire rains on Juxta. Fred stood silent beside him, watching the sky light up once again as yet another wave of attacks began. And Fred. Yes, sir. Inform the Council of Elders that I want an emergency airdrop of high-grade mana cores from planet Noxus. If the righteous faction keeps up this intensity for another week, I'll need a backup battery to keep the sky from breaking. Charles informed, as Fred saluted him before running off. Flick. Charles flicked his spent cigarette over the edge of the tower and pulled another from his coat, before lighting it slowly as he continued to count the explosions in the sky. 101,102.103. The explosions continued to ring in the sky, as he watched the broken bits fall down towards the planet's surface with steely calm eyes. "Come on then, righteous bastards," he growled under his breath. "Let's see how long you can keep this little light show going. Surely, even you can't keep losing thousands of ships every day. Can you?" Planet Tithia, Inner Furnace District, Supreme Master Blacksmith Argo's Forge. After his meeting with the First Elder concluded, the 12th Elder stepped into the Inner Furnace District, which was home to the undisputed best blacksmiths in the universe. He had come here to secure a small dimensional portal point that he could supply Leo with in order to complete the mission. However, when he made the request to Master Argo through a communication crystal the previous day, the man had not taken it well and immediately started shouting like a rabid dog. In the end, Argo demanded that Noir visit him in person at the forge, which left Noir with no choice but to make the trip himself. Crackle. Noir's neatly pressed robes billowed faintly as heatwaves rolled over him like silent fire. Sparks danced through the air as hammers pounded molten metal, and apprentices scrambled to make space, bowing low the moment they recognized who had entered. But the man at the center of it all did not bow. He didn't even glance up. Until Noir cleared his throat once. "Supreme Master Argo, you called for me," he began, as the sound of hammering ceased instantly. The chief blacksmith raised his soot-streaked face, his expression not one of reverence, but exasperation. "You people again," Argo muttered, before he stood up fully, wiped his palms on a dirty rag, and without warning, bit into one of them. Rip. The sharp snap of his teeth-tearing fabric echoed through the smithy. "Are you out of your damn mind, Lord 12th? Argo snapped, eyes blazing as he spat the torn rag aside and stepped forward. Noir blinked, caught off guard not by the words, but by the sheer hostility in the man's tone. "Like I already explained to Lord 4th when he came into my smithy with the same harebrained idea as you, what you're asking for is not practical." Argo barked, his voice thunderous now, startling several of the junior smiths nearby. Noir frowned, but said nothing. Argo didn't wait for a reply. He bent down, picked up 2 random pieces of junk metal from the forge floor, and held them up. "Let me spell it out for you like you're a first year at the Academy of Arcana Science," he growled. "Teleportation has laws, rules, limits. The bigger the jump, the bigger the damn gate needs to be." He held up one finger, positioning the 2 objects a centimeter apart. "If I want to teleport this scrap from here to just 1 centimeter left, I can do that. A grain-sized portal will suffice, smaller than your thumb, and it'll work flawlessly." He then extended the other hand, pointing skyward. "But now, if I want to teleport this same chunk of trash from here to planet Ixtal." His gaze bored into Noir's. "Then the portal required would need to be the size of this entire planet, Lord 12th. He let the metal clatter to the ground. "There's a reason instant interplanetary travel doesn't exist. The space between planets is too vast. No matter how many high-grade mana stones or divine energy cores you throw at me, the physics just won't bend." Noir's brow twitched. He hadn't expected miracles, but he hadn't expected the limit to be so sharp. "So what you're saying," he said slowly, "is that if I want a teleportation point small enough to fit in my pocket, but still capable of sending a squad in and out, then the operatives need to already be on that planet to make the jump." "Exactly," Argo muttered, already massaging his forehead. "Close is an understatement, they would have to be within 10 kilometers, or you make the portal point larger." "Much larger." He sighed. "I told the 4th Elder the same thing when he tried to storm the Grand Arena with 5 divisions using a coin-sized gate. The damn thing collapsed and melted 2 of my assistants' faces off." Noir winced. "And don't get me wrong, we definitely have come a long way compared to the rest of the universe in dimensional travel. We've got dimensional anchors, quantum relays, and some new hybrid magic tech platforms. But we're still bound by the rules of space, time, and energy." He paused for breath, then added coldly, "So no, Lord 12th, I cannot forge you a ping-pong ball that teleports troops from Tithia to Twin Fang." Noir looked down, his fingers tapping his wrist. He had promised Leo a portal. Had told him the cult would handle the rest after he dropped the portal point inside the Black Serpent's vault, but clearly, the situation was more difficult than he'd thought. He looked back at Argo. So then, what can we do? Argo blew out a breath and walked over to his bench. The best I can offer you is a photo frame-sized dimensional gate, he said. It won't be fancy, and it'll take me at least 7 more days to calibrate, but I'll make it portable and durable. Noir's expression darkened. And the range? If I push it to the absolute edge, Argo muttered, it might let you link to a supply ship orbiting near Twin Fang. Something small. Something close. He met Noir's eyes again. Which means, your people will need to hijack a courier vessel or a low-orbit skiff if you want a realistic shot at getting back. It's doable. But the real danger starts after the teleportation. Noir nodded silently. It wasn't the clean operation he wanted, but it was the best they could do. Well, if that's the best you can do, then the soldiers will have to make the rest work from their end. Thank you, Supreme Master, he said at last, as he bowed before turning away. As he stepped out of the forge and the searing heat gave way to cold air, his frown instantly deepened. This was supposed to be a secure and easy mission after Leo dropped off the portal point. However, today just seemed to be a day full of unnecessary headaches. It's a good thing that Supreme Master Argos is the most talented blacksmith we have, a pioneer in both dimensional and missile technology, because with that attitude, no one would tolerate him otherwise, Noir muttered. Realistically, it's going to be far more difficult for Skyshard to smuggle a photo frame-sized device into the vault room compared to something pocket-sized. But I suppose he'll just have to step up his game. He paused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. The same applies to the operatives completing the heist. They'll have to adapt quickly and manage far more variables due to the teleportation's limited range. Noir let out a small sigh and shook his head. Well, I have done everything I could to provide them with the best resources available. The rest is in their hands now. Noir said at the end, as he shrugged his shoulders and began thinking about other important issues now, which was how to deal with the labor unions once he went back to planet Vorthas. In his mind, he was working to the edge of his abilities and doing the best he could for the cult and its people. However, while his intention to help the cult was indeed present, his methods to achieve desired results were most definitely questionable. Fourth Elder's private office. The spy bowed low, his figure draped in a black robe that seemed to shift and shimmer with each breath he took, the spell-woven fabric muting all sound as he stepped forward into the chamber. The 12th Elder visited Supreme Master Argo's forge this afternoon, the spy reported calmly, his voice steady but hushed. He requested the construction of a dimensional portal point. The 4th Elder's eyes narrowed. For what purpose? He asked, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The spy hesitated, then lowered his head even further. The exact objective wasn't disclosed, but from what I gathered through observation and chatter at the forge, it appears they are planning a heist. Possibly to retrieve something important from enemy territory. The level of discretion they're operating under strongly suggests it. The room was silent for a moment. Only the soft ticking of the Elder's ancient chronometer echoed faintly in the corner of the room. I see, the 4th Elder replied after a pause, his voice unnervingly calm. You've done well. You may go. The spy bowed again, backed out of the room without a sound, and closed the ornate doors behind him. And then, crash, the 4th Elder erupted. His sleeves flared as he violently swept every document, relic, and instrument off his desk in one furious motion. Glass shattered on the floor, ink splattered across the ivory tiles, and sealed scrolls tumbled like dead leaves onto the ground. Damn him, he roared, pacing across the room with fists clenched. That pretentious puppet, he's actually doing it. He's moving for the scroll. While I waste time here building influence and hiring instructors, he's closing in on making his candidate the next dragon, like a street rat schemer. He ran a hand through his slick hair, breaths shallow and nostrils flaring. If he succeeds, it will be over for me. He who controls the dragon controls the cult. The 1st Elder rose to prominence only because of his hold on Noah. If I ever want to become the new 1st Elder, then I must have my own dragon. His eyes blazed with fury and panic, his mind already racing through contingency plans, informants, and blackmail options. Because if the 12th Elder retrieved that scroll before the agreed timeline, then the balance of power within the cult would shift permanently. And 4th Elder had no intention of playing second fiddle to that smug bastard. Not now. Not ever. I need to get to the bottom of this. I don't want to cost the cult an opportunity to retrieve that skill scroll, but I don't want Lord 12 to win either. He mused, as he began planning counter-strategies of his own. Dash 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 dash. Meanwhile Leo, Twin Fang Planet. After sending his list of demands to the cult, Leo returned to his usual routine, immersing himself once more in daily training with the Codex. Each day, he wandered the streets of Twin Fang for hours, silently studying the emotional spectrum of those around him, as he gradually expanded his search for the sixth color. Although this had been part of his routine even before his journey into the time-stilled world, the difference between now and then was now impossible to ignore. Back then, he had seen nothing while walking through the city. Not a flicker of color. Not a hint of a single shade. But now, with the progress he had made with the Codex within the time-stilled world, results had finally begun to show. The same streets that looked colorless before, now came to life with scattered traces of red, pink, maroon and blue, revealing the emotions he had already learned to identify. For the most part, he could not spot any color on the majority of pedestrians passing him. But once in a while he could now catch a glimpse of maroon when an assassin who was walking a bit too briskly brushed past him. Or a hint of light blue, when a woman walked out of a beauty parlor, looking fresh and beautiful. My time within the time-stilled world has really helped me understand emotions. Leo realized, as he could distinctly remember how he struggled to spot a single color in his surroundings before the trip, but could see them on the regular now. He kept walking, weaving his way past clustered intersections and street-side stalls, his eyes subtly scanning the flow of bodies around him. A tired old man dozing near a spice stand showed no color. The pair of twin brothers sparring outside a training hall showed no color. Even the assassin sitting quietly on a rooftop, watching him with half-lidded eyes showed nothing. But then a child ran past him, her arms outstretched like wings, as she chased a small puppy off its leash, as for just a second, Leo caught a flicker of pink trailing behind her. Faint, but unmistakable. Only children and dogs love unconditionally, he thought, as he smiled faintly and continued walking. Later, he caught a thick red in his surroundings, as a tall, broad-shouldered assassin brushed past a courier and kept walking like nothing happened, yet a thick streak of blood red clung to his back like smoke trailing a blade. Leo slowed his pace slightly, eyes narrowing. This is not normal. Unlike the earlier fleeting flashes of red he'd seen from those simply irritated or defensive, this one didn't fade. It lingered, heavy, saturated. He tilted his head slightly, wondering if the man had just received some disturbing news. Or perhaps he was stewing in rage from a conversation earlier that day. But that wasn't it. The shade was too thick. Too intent. It didn't tremble or fade. Like the murderous intent was a constant on the man's mind. He might actually kill someone today, Leo thought, his expression unreadable. I guess there's only one way to find out. He concluded, as to satisfy his own curiosity, he began to follow him. The man made no unnecessary stops. He didn't check for tails. Didn't deviate or hesitate. Just walked through the outer districts of Twin Fang City with a constant rhythm and eventually slipped out past the city's perimeter without drawing attention. Leo stayed far behind to avoid detection, but always within sight as he tailed him relentlessly. Nearly 2 hours passed before the assassin reached a quiet countryside bridge, nestled between two broken farmlands just beyond the hillside. The sky had already begun to dim into orange, shadows stretching longer as the sun dipped lower. When he spotted another figure that was waiting there. Perhaps for that man himself. The two exchanged a package. Quick, precise. No handshake. No warmth. Just a transaction. Leo watched from the treetops above as the assassin reached out with one hand, and without a moment's warning, slit the other man's throat clean. No words spoken. No hesitation. Just one move. The body dropped with a dull thud, followed by the faint splash of blood spilling between the wooden planks of the bridge. As it was only after the deed was done, that the red clinging the man started to fade slowly. Leo remained crouched, expression calm, his hands resting lightly on his knees. So it was murder, after all. He watched the assassin walk away slowly, pocketing the package and vanishing back toward the city like nothing had happened. That shade of red, it hadn't lied. When the red refused to fade, it meant murder after all, as Leo managed to deepen his understanding of the Codex because of this incident. 7 days later, Twin Fang Planet, Leo's apartment. It was 9 a.m. and Leo had just returned from his morning walk. Now back in his room, shirtless and doing push-ups, he was midway through a set of 200 when. Knock knock. Delivery for Leo Skyshard, called a voice from outside the door. The voice sounded loud and bored, the kind that had done this 1,000 times already in his life, which gave Leo the impression that this wasn't a trap, as he walked towards the door without reaching for a weapon. Talk. Being cautious still, he opened the slit of his door and peeked outside, as only after he confirmed that the delivery man had no warrior aura at all, did he finally open the door. "You're Leo Skyshard?" the delivery man asked, as Leo nodded, and eyed the package behind him. It was massive, and looked like a boxed TV unit, as for a moment Leo felt confused as to what it was. "Need your thumbprint here, Mr. Skyshard," the courier muttered without looking up from his data screen, as he tapped a few buttons and turned it towards Leo to get his biometrics. Tap. Leo complied, but not before checking the sender's tag etched into the box's digital label, as he read the sender's name to be Mian Fei. Of course, Mian Fei was a moniker that he recognized instantly, for it was Mu Fan's alias when she was his instructor at Rodova. So it's from the cult, Leo thought, as he moved out of the way for the courier guy to drop it inside his house. Thunk. The package made a soft thunk as the courier gently slid it into the apartment before turning to leave. "Have a good day then, sir," he said, as Leo gave him a small nod, then shut the door behind him, silence falling once again in his room. He stood in front of the box for a second, arms folded. Then, without much ceremony, he ripped it open. And froze. Inside, cushioned in thick mana-treated foam, was a photo frame-sized rectangular slab, about as large as a small TV screen, if not a bit heavier and thicker. Metal corners reinforced it. Its back pulsed faintly with embedded rune channels, and the entire thing looked more like a siege weapon than a dimensional portal point. "You've got to be kidding me," Leo muttered, staring at the object like it had just insulted his intelligence. "They actually want me to carry this inside the vault." He crouched, inspecting the reinforced corners, the density and the ridiculous weight distribution of the frame, before reaching the conclusion that there was no way this would pass unnoticed through the Black Serpent's security, as let alone fooling a proper security scan, this would probably not even fool the guards stationed outside. "Idiots, I'm working with idiots," he sighed, and then noticed a slim envelope wedged into the packaging, as he unsealed it with growing frustration. To the agent in charge of this drop. This is a bidirectional dimensional gate. You are to place it within your target location and activate it using the accompanying core. Do not misalign it. Do not move it after calibration. It is fragile and dangerous once powered. Detailed instructions on how to align and power it are attached in the form of a drawing on the backside of this message. Supreme Master Argo. Leo's head tilted slightly, brow furrowing as he flipped the paper and saw a detailed diagram on how to connect the power core to the frame and how to then secure it to a wall. Along with it, he found the small energy core in the middle of the foam packaging, which although being palm-sized, still hummed with incredible energy. He stared at both objects in silence. And then the headache began. "You've got to be kidding me, I really am working with idiots," he repeated, louder this time. This entire plan was already a nightmare. He was a cult agent infiltrating cult technology into a dangerous assassin organization vault. However, now that technology had turned from a small pocket-sized object that he was promised into a heavy TV-sized frame, that was half his height and twice the weight. "Fuck me," he muttered, as he leaned against the wall, ready to make an early morning rant call to Mew Fan, when he spotted something else tucked beneath the frame. A smaller box, no bigger than his fist. He opened it cautiously, as inside he found a spherical black object the size of a keychain, that was smooth and cold to the touch, and had another folded note taped to it. Figured your politician who probably gave you this mission didn't think about how you would get it to your desired location, so this is something extra I'm sending with the package. It's another dimensional portal, with a working range of 10 kilometers. It doesn't have a mana presence and it's untraceable. If you eat it 2 days before the mission, you can probably pass any security check and make it to the other side safely. It's durable, so don't worry about your stomach acid damaging it. But you may have to hold your bowels till you're ready to bring it out. Once out, you may use your own mana to activate it, and it should allow you to retrieve this frame, if you follow the instructions I have drawn on the back of this letter. Good luck. Argo. Leo blinked, then let out a quiet breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. Well, at least one of you idiots had a brain, he muttered, placing the orb on his desk and giving it a slight roll with his fingertip. For all the incompetence and high-handedness the cult liked to operate with, this Argo fellow seemed to know how to cover for their messes. And oddly, Leo felt calmed by that. He glanced back at the frame, then at the orb, before finally looking at the back end of the second letter, which showed a complex diagram on how to set up the photo frame just above a drawn portal array that would provide a connection for a short duration of 20 seconds when activated. He could theoretically use that connection window to grab the frame and bring it inside the vault to then complete the remaining steps of the mission. However, it wasn't going to be easy for sure. It was still going to be a logistical nightmare to complete this mission, and a severe loss of moral integrity if he really had to swallow and poop out the portal ball. However, at least now, he had a viable method to complete the mission. "All right," Leo said under his breath. "I guess we're doing this." He gathered the documents, repacked the orb, and dragged the heavy frame to the corner of the room, propping it up against the wall, just beside his storage cabinet. There were still details to iron out, such as the mission timing, Plan B if things went wrong, an exit strategy, etc., but at least now he had the tools he needed to carry out this mission. Twin Fang Planet, Black Serpent Headquarters, Vice Guildmaster Antonio's office. Antonio sat behind the long wooden desk of his office, hands clasped and eyes narrowed, as the elevator door hissed open. Hiss. Captain Rima entered with calm, deliberate steps. Her silver hair was neatly braided down her back, her robes were spotless, and her gaze was razor-sharp, as though, despite surviving the chaos of the time-stilled world, she still hadn't lost her sanity. "Bo." She bowed respectfully before Antonio, her posture dignified. "At ease," Antonio said, motioning to the chair across from him. "I hope you're not plagued by too many nightmares, Captain." Rima sat, spine straight. "Haha, of course I am, Vice Guildmaster. It's not easy returning to civilian life after that place, but I'm holding up. The taint didn't get to me too badly." Antonio studied her closely, noting the steadiness in her voice and the absence of tremor in her hands. "No signs of trauma, at least not on the surface. I've summoned you here because Leo Skyshard claims that you and your team were present when he killed Transcendent Karl Maxtern. Is that true?" Rima nodded without hesitation. "It's true, sir. I witnessed it myself." Antonio raised an eyebrow, visibly taken aback. "You saw it with your own eyes." "My unit was under heavy attack," she said, voice firm. Leo appeared out of nowhere. And in a flash, Karl was dead. Just like that. One clean strike. No wasted movement. If he hadn't stepped in, I wouldn't be here. Antonio blinked slowly, digesting her words. He had no outside help. None that I could see, Rima confirmed. He handled it alone. Silence settled between them as Antonio continued to evaluate her, expression unreadable. "You're absolutely certain?" "As certain as I am sitting here, sir." He nodded slowly, then leaned back into his chair. "That'll be all, Captain." Rima stood, gave a crisp salute, and exited the room without another word. Left alone, Antonio exhaled through his nose, the silence feeling heavier than before. So, the kid really pulled it off. He mused, as something about this whole situation did not add up for him. The kid has a clean background, but somehow I don't buy his story. A boy as talented as him joining the Black Serpents by leaving Rodova early. And then instantly going to the time-stilled world, from where he has no guarantee of return. I don't believe his story. Nor his motive to be here. With his fame, he should be taking life easy, or training to improve his skills. But the desperation with which he's improving, suggests that he has a hidden agenda that I'm not aware about. Also, his request to choose an item from the vault instead of picking 6.5 billion megapixels is also suspicious. He can buy any item of his choosing for 6.5 billion megapixels from the open market, or hire the best blacksmiths to make a custom one, but he's going into the vault regardless. Why? Why go in the vault when there are only 3 items in there that are probably unique and priceless, 2 of which would be made off limits to him? It makes no sense. Something about the boy's actions does not add up. Antonio talked to himself, as he did not feel at ease about allowing Leo to enter the vault. On one hand, he couldn't deny Leo the right to enter either, because that would undermine the guild's integrity and damage its foundations. However, on the other hand, he couldn't shake off his suspicions either. With Leo openly defying the evil cult, not once but twice, Antonio could not link him to the cult, but somehow he did not trust that the boy had no hidden agenda at all. The only people desperate enough to enter the vault regardless of the price, are the evil cult operatives. They want their scroll back so bad, they will go to any lengths to get it. But the boy doesn't seem to have links to the cult. But if not them, then who? Why would someone request to enter the vault and not take the cash? Antonio mused, when the elevator door to his office hissed open again. Hiss. This time a tall man entered his room, his expression neutral as he looked into Antonio's eyes before bowing. So Frederick, what did you find by tailing the boy the past few days? Antonio asked, as the spy who had been tailing Leo for the past few days presented his report. The boy is strange. He spends most of his day aimlessly walking through the streets of Twin Fang, looking at what strangers are doing, like an old man out on a morning walk. He doesn't train his physical combat skills, nor does he do much exercise. He just walks, visits expensive restaurants, and sleeps, Frederick reported, as Antonio frowned at his words. What kind of a circuit champion doesn't train his body? Antonio asked, sounding worried, as he found Leo's behavior to be increasingly suspicious. The boy is weird, but he's not doing anything illegal, or meeting anyone suspicious. He received a package today, but when I ran the name it seemed to be from his professor at Rodova. So it's understandable. I haven't performed a security sweep of his room, but if you want me to, I can break into his apartment when he's out on a walk and give it a thorough search, Frederick suggested, as Antonio nodded and gave him the thumbs up. Do that and let me know what you find. I guess the boy being a strange loner is not a problem. He's clearly a genius, and all geniuses are a bit eccentric and unusual. But I need to make sure that he can be allowed to enter the vault before I let him in, because I can't afford to invite a wolf into a sheep pen, Antonio instructed, as Frederick bowed and turned to leave. I hope for your sake, Skyshard, that you really are as innocent as you look, because if not, I'd find great satisfaction at saving the guild 6.5 billion megapixels in reward price money. Antonio said, as he let out a deep breath and looked outside the glass window of his office, where he enjoyed the view of the sun setting over the city skyline. For a moment, as the sun dipped lower beyond the skyline, Antonio wondered if he was simply overthinking. Perhaps Leo truly was just an eccentric prodigy, haunted by something unspoken, driven by motives that weren't sinister but personal. But in Antonio's experience, there was never smoke without fire, and the fact that his instincts flagged Leo as a threat was smoke enough for him. Glug, glug. Antonio stood and poured himself a drink from the cabinet near the window, the amber liquid catching the last rays of sunlight. I'll give you your chance, boy, he muttered to himself. But I'll be watching. Because in the Black Serpents, trust wasn't given. It was earned, bled for, and proven over time. And the guild's vault was no place for secrets. If Leo had even a single hidden intention, Antonio intended to find it, drag it into the light, and crush it before it became a problem the guild couldn't contain. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, Leo's apartment, early morning, Frederick's POV. Click. Frederick shut the door quietly behind him, casting a brief glance over his shoulder to ensure no eyes lingered on the corridor, before slipping on a pair of thin black gloves and walking deeper into the apartment with silent, measured steps. Leo Skyshard had gone out for his usual morning jog, as he always did at precisely 6:30, giving Frederick a clean 90-minute window to scour the space without disturbance. He began with the obvious, lifting the pillows, running a gloved hand under the mattress, and pressing lightly across the seams as he searched for hidden compartments or fabric bulges, brushing across every corner of the bed frame with the thoroughness of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Then came the frame itself, as he crouched low and felt beneath the wood, dragging his fingers across its underside, listening for hollow knocks or the feel of embedded seals, but again found nothing out of place. Moving toward the closet, he opened it slowly and began his inspection with the same methodical care, sliding his fingers through the folds of Leo's robes, feeling along the lining and tugging gently on the fabric's edge, before picking up a small spherical keychain that sat alone on the upper shelf. He turned it in his palm, noting its weight and surface texture, then attempted to press it from all sides, waiting for it to spring open or a hidden mechanism to reveal itself, yet the object remained inert, showing no sign of deforming at all, as it just seemed to be a regular keychain with no mana signature, as far as he could tell. He placed it back exactly where it had been, aligning the chain and letting it rest as naturally as possible, before shifting his attention to the daggers hanging in the closet. He wrapped a hand around the hilts, lifted each blade gently, and tapped them against his knuckles, feeling for hidden compartments or mana-sealed channels, but everything about them appeared standard and unmodified. His sweep moved next to the bathroom next, where he opened the shower cap, leaned in close, and tapped each tile one by one, applying light pressure as he verified that they were solid, unmoving, and free of illusion magic. The drain cover was lifted, the inner lining examined, and still, there was no indication of anything hidden or out of the ordinary. By the time he stepped back into the main room, his brow had furrowed slightly, as he took in the near barren room once again, noting the lack of any large object that could account for the television-sized package Leo had received the day before. There was nothing visible in the apartment that could match the dimensions of the delivery, nothing tucked behind furniture or stored against a wall, and that only left one possibility: Leo had either disposed of the package entirely, or more likely, he had stored it inside his storage ring. And while there was nothing inherently suspicious about keeping a valuable item in one's personal storage, it did raise a flag. Because if Leo had received something so large that he carried on himself at all times, then the guild needed to inspect that storage ring before granting him access to the vault. I can't give the boy a clean chit, but he's not a threat as far as I can discern. He's odd, but then again, all kids his age are odd, Frederick mused, as he moved out of Leo's apartment with the same caution that he came in with, and locked the door using the makeshift master key he had made, leaving no trace that he was ever there. Meanwhile, Leo, who was oblivious to him being under surveillance, came back feeling accomplished after a productive morning walk, where he spotted 2 trails of pink and 1 trail of blue in the air. He had stored the frame and letters in his storage ring versus his apartment, only because he was paranoid about leaving such stuff in the open, where anyone could discover it, but he did not take the ball with him, as it was undetectable and harmless. Thankfully, his paranoid caution played to his advantage, as despite having his apartment ransacked, he was not flagged as a threat, allowing him to enjoy a few more days of freedom, despite being under intense scrutiny. Unlock. As he stepped back into his apartment, he remained oblivious to the search operation that had been carried out here just moments ago, as Frederick had done a great job of covering his tracks. Time to work out, then shower, he mused, as he removed his robes and dropped to the floor to start hitting push-ups, while Frederick typed his report for Antonio. Ping. A message from Frederick blinked to life on the embedded data slate built into Antonio's desk, as he leaned forward and read it with slow, deliberate patience. Greater than I thoroughly searched the apartment and found no illegal enchantments, artifacts, or evidence of cultist contact. All visible belongings appear mundane: robes, weapons, personal hygiene items, and a spherical keychain object with no mana signature or mechanical triggers. The boy lives alone, keeps his space sparse, and arranges it with the caution of someone expecting to be watched. One thing to note: I found no large object in the apartment that matches the dimensions of the delivery he received yesterday. Given the clean layout and absence of any storage furniture capable of housing such an item, it is likely the boy placed it into his personal storage ring. If possible, I recommend a full ring inspection prior to granting vault access. Frederick. Antonio sat back, rubbing the edge of his chin with 2 fingers as his thoughts circled back to the first time Leo had arrived at the headquarters. He had already asked the boy to empty his ring once, right here in this very office, and Leo had complied without resistance. Everything he'd taken out that day was personally scanned by him, so repeating the same request now would seem excessive. Possibly even insulting. No, not yet, Antonio muttered under his breath. The last thing I want is to spook him or tip him off. He drummed his fingers once across the slate's glass surface before switching off the display, his mind already moving ahead to the solution. The vault had its own protocols. A full body scan, mana signature sweep, inventory check, these were all standard measures for high-level clearance. If Leo planned to enter the vault, he would have to empty his ring again anyway, this time under guild supervision, and as part of procedure, so asking him to do it at random was probably unnecessary. Sigh. Antonio exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease from his frame. The boy seems clean enough. I'll ask for his inspection process to be even more rigid than usual, but other than that, I think I can let him enter. He stood and walked toward the wide window, eyes scanning the guild's core towers once more as the early morning light painted them silver blue. I won't stop him, he said softly, but I won't give him a single chance to fool us either. Because if Leo Skyshard really was after something dangerous, Antonio would make sure the guild saw through his schemes before he succeeded. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, Leo's apartment, 2 days later. Thud, thud, thud. Leo's back arched upward before collapsing to the floor again, his breath steady and rhythm controlled as he completed yet another set of sit-ups. Sweat beaded down his temple, pooling against the hollow of his collarbone, but his movements did not slow. Despite having trained continuously for the past 2 hours, the explosiveness of his movements had not diminished in the slightest, a clear testament to how drastically his body had improved during his time in the time-stilled world, where the ambient mana was far denser than usual and had accelerated his physical development, especially considering that his previous limit before fatigue began to set in had barely reached 45 minutes. Bees. A sudden vibration from beside him made him lose count of his repetitions, as his neck stiffened and he paused the sit-ups. The vibration came from his personal communication crystal, which he had set up beside him before starting to train, as today was the day when Mu Fan had promised him a video call with his family, to show him that the demands he had put forward had indeed been met by the cult. I hope it's that call, he prayed, as he reached for the communication crystal and channeled his mana through, to establish the connection. Gurgle. His stomach rolled in anticipation when the call finally connected, as he could hardly hide the smile on his face. However, the face that he saw on the other side was not the same one that he had been expecting. He expected to see one of his family members, but instead, he came across the visage of an unfamiliar uniformed man whose jaw was square, whose bearing was military, and whose tone left no room for negotiation. Your voice and video are both muted on this end, so you throwing signs or shouting at the top of your lungs will be for naught. What I am showing you is for viewing only, the man declared flatly, before rotating the orb he held in his hand, as the view shifted from his face to that of a large, gated property nestled between green hills and fortified walls. This property is built in the heart of the capital city of Vorthas, the soldier continued as his boots clicked sharply against stone, once the estate of Dragon Derek 250 years ago. It now belongs to the Skyshard family, as per your request. Leo leaned closer instinctively, his eyes locked to the scene unfolding before him, as he took in the view of his new house. It was vintage style, with a lot of greenery and sculptures, and on first impression looked large enough. Not bad, he thought internally, as his lips parted slightly but without sound. Step, step. He watched the soldier march with a military cadence, as one after another a couple security gates opened for him, allowing him to march unimpeded into the estate grounds. Salute, salute. Other soldiers along the path snapped to attention, saluting as the man passed. However, he didn't return the gesture. He simply walked, step after unwavering step, until he ascended a short staircase and stepped onto the porch of the mansion. There, on the old wooden swing under the shaded overhang, sat a woman sharpening a blade with quiet, measured strokes, her movements fluid and unbothered, her eyes lifting momentarily to glance at the orb before returning to the steel in her hands. That was Alia, his brother's girlfriend. Leo's breath hitched in his throat. A soft smile broke across his lips as a genuine and uncontrollable warmth spread through his chest. There were strands of silver now threaded through her once impeccable black hair, faint signs that the last 2 years had been probably cruel to her, yet her posture remained firm, her spirit unbowed, as she looked healthy and sturdy more or less. The soldier paused to show her for a few seconds, before continuing on his tour. He walked through the broad corridor of the mansion, entering the living room where Leo saw them both, his mother Elena and his father Jacob. Elena looked gaunt, her arms thinner than he remembered, the outline of her bones more visible beneath the worn robe she wore. She was holding Jacob's hand tightly, her knuckles pale from the grip, as if afraid that letting go might cause him to vanish. Jacob sat quietly beside her, his right eye concealed beneath a thick gauze bandage stained faintly red and yellow, the signs of an unhealed wound obvious even from the camera's limited angle. Leo's eyes softened as he saw them. He felt the urge to rush up to his mother and hug her on the spot, but he knew he couldn't. While he also felt a weird flicker of worry for his father's eye wound, as he wondered if he'd lost the eye or was it just scratched. I guess I'll find that out when I meet them soon enough. They're alive, and that's enough for now, he thought, as the feed shifted again, with the soldier now walking towards the mansion's kitchen. Sizzle. Leo could hear a loud sizzling noise as soon as the soldier entered the kitchen, as inside stood a large man with gray hair in a stained apron, who seemed to be frying something on an open burner while arguing with a tiny creature perched on his shoulder. Leo blinked, then burst into a quiet chuckle, unable to help the involuntary grin that stretched across his face. I'm telling you, Grandpa, the oil is not hot enough. The fish loses flavor the longer you heat it, Dumpy complained in his tiny voice. And I'm telling you to shut up. I've been cooking fish before you were ever born, brat. Ben fired back without looking at him, flipping the sizzling meat with a scowl. Leo's laughter died only when Dumpy's tiny amphibian head tilted toward the soldier, his eyes sharpening with menace. I have tolerated your presence long enough, mongrel. Be gone from my sight now or prepare to fight. The soldier didn't respond to the threat verbally, he only scoffed before turning as he made his way out of the kitchen and towards the passage that opened to the stairs leading upwards. Step, step. He climbed upstairs, before reaching another large corridor and turning left, as he approached a closed room and knocked softly before entering. Knock, knock. He pushed the door slowly, revealing a woman with brown hair seated at a cluttered desk, a flame spirit hovering beside her as she used a screwdriver-like tool to adjust the inside of some complex engine. She turned with a blank look, confused. Want something? She asked, as the soldier simply shook his head and left, leaving the brown-haired girl to return to her work before the door clicked shut. Gasp. Leo felt his breath stolen when he caught the glimpse of his love, Amanda, as although the moment the camera showed her was brief, it was enough for him to know that she was okay, and that she looked as beautiful as ever. An uncontrollable warmth spread inside his chest when he saw her, as he began grinning like a complete fool. With his heart beating out of his chest. "I'll be seeing you real soon. Babe," he thought, as the soldier walked to the last and final door. This one was different from the others, as outside this door stood a herd of medics, nurses and healers, with the entire space seemingly buzzing with tension. "Excuse me," the soldier said as he pushed through the crowd and stepped into the dimly lit room, where there was a single bed and lots of machinery surrounding it. Leo's pupils contracted. On the bed lay Luke. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, barely breathing. His ribs protruded sharply beneath skin that was tight and sickly, blotched with dark patches and festering wounds that never closed. Scars ran across his neck, down his arms, curling like vines of pain etched into flesh. Leo rose to his feet, not even aware he had done so. His fists clenched, and for a moment, the crystal trembled in his grasp, flickering with unstable energy as the overwhelming rage within him bled into his aura. The soldier just stayed in the room for barely enough time to show Leo that Luke was alive, before walking back out. "The agreement from our side has hence been completed. You may see them in person once your mission is done," the soldier said, his voice sounding as flat as ever, as he emotionlessly cut the call, the crystal ball in Leo's hands turning black as soon as the connection was cut. "What happened to my brother?" Leo spoke slowly, the murderous intent burning inside his chest turning into a volcano ready to erupt, as a powerful blood-red aura enveloped him, unlike anything that had ever clung to him before. At this moment, Leo finally understood why the cult had decided to mute the call. For this was one conversation that they probably did not wish to hold with him right now. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, Leo's apartment. The crimson hue that engulfed the room pulsed like a storm barely held in check, wild and chaotic as it licked against the apartment walls as if yearning to devour something, anything. Leo stood amidst it, his fists clenched so tight that faint trickles of blood had begun to seep from where his nails dug into flesh, his breathing uneven and sharp, as if each breath he took was fighting a war of its own. Monarch's indifference trembled within him, the skill that had, until now, acted as an unshakable wall between his emotions and actions, struggling to suppress the maelstrom that surged within his chest. For the first time in months, its calming whispers faltered completely, unable to anchor him at all, as the image of Luke's scarred and hollow frame refused to leave his mind. "What happened to my brother?" he wondered, as a million memories rushed forth like an unstoppable flood, Luke carrying him on his back through rain-soaked streets, shielding him from bullies in the alleys, rubbing his hair roughly while pretending to be stern but always laughing a second later. That brother, who once stood as an unbreakable shield in Leo's eyes, now looked like a corpse that had forgotten to stop breathing. "Who did this, who?" Leo whispered, voice low and dangerous, as if speaking louder might shatter something within him. The blood-red aura around him flared once again, rising in sharp peaks like wildfire reacting to gasoline, as for a single heartbeat, he genuinely considered burning down the entire cult with his bare hands. His mind leapt to conclusions, venomous and rapid. Could it be them? Could this entire performance, the silent video call, the muted connection, the carefully curated presentation, have been a ploy to hide their own crimes? Were they the ones who had torn Luke down to that state, only now showing him as a grotesque form of leverage? Images flooded his mind. Mu Fan lying in a pool of her own blood. Cult operatives screaming as their throats were opened with surgical precision. A trail of corpses left in his wake like he used to do in the VR game Terra Nova Online, back when justice had no face, just a black and white striped mask. But then, his breath hitched and his rational side caught up. He didn't know anything yet. There was no confirmation, no context. The injuries could have been from before. They could have come from someone else entirely. For all he knew, the cult might even be trying to keep Luke alive. Maybe they were stabilizing him, healing him slowly, trying to prepare him for the return Leo had demanded. Maybe it was not as bad as it looked. Maybe by the time he returned to Vorthas, Luke would be awake again. Laughing, eating with them, fully healed, with all that pain wiped clean from his body, like a bad memory they'd soon forget. He couldn't afford to spiral. Not now. No. I can't be hasty to reach conclusions right now. I'll be with them soon enough, and I'll know the truth then. Until that moment, I need to stay sharp. I need to finish this mission, so that when I do return home, there will be no more chains, no more conditions, no more waiting. Just me and them, finally free. He thought, as his heartbeat slowed, his grip loosened, and the air around him calmed. The crimson aura, once wild and threatening, slowly receded, melting into the silence of the apartment as if it had never been there at all. And with it, the boy who had nearly lost control found himself again. Steadier, colder, focused. The fire still burned within him, but now it burned with purpose, clear, sharpened, and unwavering, as he found himself more driven than ever before to complete the heist and reach planet Vorthas with every ounce of speed he could muster, for nothing else in the universe seemed to matter as much as that did now. Dash 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 dash. Elsewhere, Mu Clan-controlled planet, secure communication room. Mu Fan sat still, her hands trembling slightly as she held the communication crystal close to her lips, her voice barely more than a whisper. How could you allow this to happen? She asked, her throat tightening around every syllable, her brows furrowed in horror. Luke is a dragon candidate himself, and you just pushed him to the edge of death. A moment passed before the crystal flickered, revealing the indistinct silhouette of the 12th Elder seated within a dim, stone-walled chamber, his posture relaxed, but his eyes devoid of sympathy. His voice emerged cold and detached, as if the boy's condition was nothing more than collateral. I don't directly oversee the training cell responsible for his regimen, he replied flatly, his tone tinged with indifference. But results speak for themselves. Just a few days ago, Luke achieved a breakthrough into the Grandmaster realm. The training worked. Mu Fan's grip tightened on the crystal, her eyes wide with anguish as she struggled to remain composed. He's barely alive, she muttered, her voice thick with accusation. Yes. He exhausted himself completely in the process, the elder continued without pause, as if reading from a report. 14 months of being on the run, hunted across star systems, the toll was bound to surface. His breakthrough came at the cost of severe internal damage. His mana circuits are in shambles, yes, but it's nothing permanent. The healers are already tending to him. Once his circuits are mended and his body stabilized, he'll recover. Mu Fan looked away from the crystal for a moment, a hand covering her mouth, before slowly shaking her head as her voice returned, quiet but urgent. You don't understand the damage you're doing, she said. I know Leo. I know the attachment he has to his family, and if Leo sees him like that, if he sees his brother in that state with no clear explanation, there will be hell to pay. He will begin to see the cult as his enemy and there will be nothing that we could do to convince him otherwise. She warned, as this time, the elder paused, his fingers steepling in thought before a faint smile crept into his voice. Yes, that's precisely why, when Luke wakes up, the only memories he will have will be of being pursued and tortured by the righteous faction. Not as, he clarified, his voice calm and disturbingly methodical. So when Leo finally meets his brother again, his fury will fall where it should, which is upon our enemies. Don't worry, the 12th Elder added, his voice fading as the crystal dimmed, I've thought this through, I wasn't born yesterday and I know how to keep my dragon candidates alive and in check. Click. The call ended, and the light of the room grew cold once more. As Mu Fan remained seated in silence, the crystal still clutched in her hand like a dying ember of hope. Her thoughts raced, but her face remained unreadable, save for the faint tremble in her jaw and the way her nails dug into her palm. She had seen the cult's ruthlessness before, had even accepted its necessity in dark times. But this felt different. If they were willing to rewrite a boy's memories just to weaponize his pain, then how were they any different or less evil than the righteous faction they hated? A slow chill settled in her chest, deeper than fear, colder than dread, as for the first time, Mu Fan began to wonder if the very cult she'd sworn to protect might one day become the enemy she'd have to face. Twin Fang Planet, Outer Housing Ring, one day before the heist. The wind outside howled softly through the cracks in the glass windows, but Leo sat unmoved on the edge of his bed, shirtless and cross-legged, his eyes fixed not on the world around him but on the shifting canvas of thought that unfurled within his mind. It had been a long day of planning, and tomorrow promised to be longer still. He had absolutely no idea about the exact internal security procedures that the Black Serpents Guild had in place to access the vault, and it was a situation that left him feeling uneasy. There seemed to be no concrete information on what security measures one had to go through to access the vault, as apart from the Guildmaster and Vice Guildmaster, the vault was almost never accessed by anyone else. So instead, he had to fill the gaps in his knowledge with the next best substitute he could find, which was researching the security measures of other top-tier bank vaults across the universe, and understanding what protocol was typically followed when one tried to access them. A brief trip to the Black Serpent's internal library had yielded a collection of obscure tomes and first-hand records about past heists on secure vaults scattered across the galaxy. And while the names and locations differed, the procedure before one could access the vault was always more or less the same. A full-body pat-down and advanced scan was standard protocol. Almost no serious organization skipped this step, as they had to ensure that nothing foreign made its way in or out. This is the most obvious part, yet the idiots at the cult who assigned me this mission forgot about it, Leo silently cursed, as he recalled how the cult had expected him to slide into the vault holding a giant 4-foot frame without a proper plan, as if doing so was as easy as killing a mosquito by hand. However, thankfully, a competent blacksmith had given him a way out. The second protocol was that storage items, including rings, pouches, or dimensional scrolls, were never permitted inside. The risk was too great. Items could be smuggled out. Or worse, detonated from within. Which meant that there was a very high likelihood his storage ring would be confiscated before he entered, only to be returned once he exited the vault with a single item in hand. This much was common sense, but I guess I can't make any plans that make use of my storage ring, Leo concluded, as he waved this second protocol off as a minor inconvenience. The third protocol, however, made things slightly trickier. Some institutions employed arcane detection spells that could sense hidden runes or sigils inscribed directly onto one's skin or beneath one's robes, to ensure that no individual carried hidden enchantments or tools. In such cases, the entrant was often ordered to strip, to prove they bore no such enhancements. However, having no such suspicious markings or tattoos on his body, Leo was not particularly worried about this step either, as it was rather the fourth and fifth protocols that truly concerned him. As according to the books he read, entrants to secure vaults were often asked to take a vomit potion before entering, as they were required to spill their guts out before being granted entry. This step was implemented to ensure that no one carried a hidden object within their throat, chest cavity, or stomach. Which meant that his initial plan to swallow the keychain ball shortly before heading to the vault and then vomiting it back out was no longer viable. Which also meant that his only backup plan now was to swallow the keychain 12 hours prior to the heist and then push it out from the other end. I hate it, Leo thought, as it was simply a demeaning and undignified thing to do. However, it remained the safest option available. Still, while the fourth protocol was a solvable inconvenience, the fifth was a problem that could only be left up to fate. For if the serpents stationed an observer inside the vault, whether it be a guard, a high-ranking officer, or even a surveillance camera, it would be enough to nullify the entire mission. Because even if he successfully extracted the key, and even if he managed to stay calm under observation, there would be no opportunity for him to set up the dimensional portal as instructed by Master Argo if there were eyes watching him the entire time. Hence, if such a watcher was indeed present, Leo knew better than to risk his life by attempting to execute the plan anyway, as he decided that retreat would be the only logical course of action in that case. For now, life still mattered more than pride, as he understood that a dead self could not protect his family. However, while Security Protocol 5 was very difficult to work around, it was also very rarely implemented. Most organizations did not allow their guards to witness what lay beyond the vault gates, not because they trusted the visitor, but because they trusted no one. Guards were expendable, secrets were not, And so the chance of being watched inside was minimal, though not entirely impossible. And that information gave him some comfort. After thinking about what could go wrong with the heist, Leo's mind shifted next to planning his escape route. Contrary to popular dramatics, he didn't intend to disappear the moment he claimed his reward. That would only raise alarms. Instead, he planned to linger, to mingle, to act like a proud student who had simply collected his rightful prize. Then, a few hours later, he planned to pretend to make an excited return trip to planet Rodova, an act he'd rehearsed in his mind a dozen times already. Once aboard the private transport ship, likely carrying him alone, he would strike by taking out the pilot quickly, before reprogramming the ship's flight path to divert toward a predetermined dead zone in deep orbit. As once he arrived there, a cult transport vessel would already be waiting to collect him, as per their already arranged agreement. From there, the course was simple. To Vortha's, directly, to meet his family once more. However, if anything went wrong, if suspicion fell on him prematurely, or if he failed to take the reward without drawing attention, he would abandon the flight and stay grounded on Twin Fang, playing the role of an innocent guild member. He did not mind staying on Twin Fang for an extra week or two, but he wanted his exit to be quick and clean. For he did not wish to be caught in an intergalactic speed chase. I guess tomorrow is going to be another stressful day, Leo mused to himself, as until now, he had not even thought about what prize he would claim from within the Black Serpent's vault. He had been so busy planning the heist, that his mind had not even paused to think about the legal reward he could walk out with. As right now, the completion of the mission seemed to be the only reward he cared about. Twin Fang Planet, Black Serpent's Guild Headquarters, Vice Guildmaster's office, morning of the heist. Ring ring, ring ring. The inbuilt data slate inside Antonio's desk rang, as Antonio received a call over the guild's intercom system. Vice Guildmaster, came the crisp voice from the security wing, as the guard who made the call sounded unhurried and composed. The boy has arrived at the gate. We are awaiting clearance, he informed, as Antonio, seated behind his broad desk, reached forward slowly, clasping his fingers as he leaned in towards the data slate. Allow him in, Antonio said, his voice measured and authoritative, as if he had come to this conclusion after a lot of thought. Ensure that all protocols are followed, he added, his tone deeper now. Every guideline I sent you. I want it all followed to the T. You understand, he emphasized, as there was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a sharp, understood, as the call disconnected. Antonio had tried his best to find a way to deny Leo entry into the vault over the last 14 days, however, in the end, he found nothing against Leo that could disqualify him from entering. Hence, when the 14th day was finally up, he finally gave Leo permission to enter. Minutes later, on the streets of the inner ring, Leo's POV. Leo walked silently between two Black Serpent operatives, their uniforms matte black with only a violet insignia marking their affiliation to the guild. This was the first time that he had seen a guild member wear such colored insignia, as he assumed they were part of some special wing that he wasn't aware of. They didn't speak. They didn't glance his way. They simply guided him from the missions hall towards the guild headquarters with eerie silence. Despite trying several times, Leo failed to discern their strength level, which seemed to be obscured by some aura-hiding artifact on their body, which was a shame, since it made him unsure about whether or not he could take them on in a fight. Then, as they arrived at the headquarters building, the trio quickly moved past the standard checkpoints without so much as a nod from the regular guards, as they made their way towards the private elevator's lobby. This was the same lobby that Leo had entered when he was escorted to meet the Vice Guildmaster. However, this time, instead of the second elevator that led to the Vice Guildmaster's office, they seemed to wait for the third one, which was the furthest to the right. Wait, one of the two operatives said, as he stepped forward and withdrew a thin, blade-like token from a hidden sheath in his belt, before inserting it into a vertical slit just beside the third elevator. Buzz. A brief flicker of white light rippled across the door's surface as it recognized the token and parted with a glide, allowing the trio to step in. Elevator music. Elevator music started playing as soon as the trio stepped into the elevator and the doors closed shut, as Leo patiently waited for the motion to start. However, to his surprise, it never did. Minutes passed by, and he felt no motion, no lurch, no jerk. Nothing to indicate that the elevator was moving at all, which genuinely perplexed him. It was a descent without descent. A journey without motion, as he couldn't be sure whether they were teleporting, falling, or simply being reassembled elsewhere. And yet, the longer he stood there, the more his ears began to thrum, as a subtle shift in pressure made the bones in his jaw tighten and his temples ache ever so slightly, signaling that they were, in fact, going down, and quite possibly too much down. Then, after what seemed like 10 to 12 minutes within the elevator, the doors suddenly slid open without a sound, and what greeted them was a corridor cast in soft, unnatural white light, that stretched forward with no markings, no decorations, and no sound. Called Basement Level 5, this floor had no signboards or grand entrances. Because those who came here already knew where they were going. Basement Level 5, Black Serpent's Vault, Pre-Security Chambers. What followed was a series of redundant yet precise checks. First, the two operatives flanking Leo underwent their own scans, providing biometric data and retinal verification as the system accepted them without protest. Then, and only then, did the inner gates unlock with a slow hiss, revealing the chamber Leo had known would come but still found himself quietly dreading. The inspection room. It was colder here, not by temperature alone, but by design, for he felt no warmth in the stone and found no charm in the layout. What he found were just clean walls, a single long counter filled with magical detection instruments, and one woman standing with her arms crossed behind her back. She was tall, taller than Leo by a few inches, with an athletic build wrapped in a form-fitting black uniform with a violet serpent's guild insignia pressed into the chest, just like the guards flanking him. Her face bore no hint of makeup, her copper-brown skin smooth and severe, while her eyes looked sharp like twin daggers that missed nothing. She approached him without preamble. "Spread your arms," she ordered, her voice firm and toneless, as she pulled on thin inspection gloves and stepped forward. Leo obeyed without a word, spreading his arms wide as she began the full-body pat-down with clinical precision. Her fingers moved along the contour of his chest and sides, pressing into the muscles of his abdomen and hips as she circled behind him. She moved with a strange detachment, neither shy nor aggressive, but with a focus born of procedure, not curiosity. Yet Leo couldn't help but feel the tension coil in his shoulders as her fingers brushed over his spine, pressing into the hollow between his shoulder blades, then sliding down the back of his thighs and calves. Her hand briefly lingered near the small of his back. No concealed sheath or scabbard, she murmured more to herself than anyone else. She stepped around to his front once more, picked up a mana detection wand from the desk, and brought it to his sternum. "Hold still," she instructed, as the device calibrated with a slow hum, aligning with the natural pulse of his mana. A few seconds passed. No foreign mana detected, no unusual pulse spikes, she muttered again, before placing the device down and glancing at the guards. "Turn around and face the wall." The two men obeyed instantly. "Strip completely," she said to Leo, her eyes never blinking. He hesitated only a second, then pulled his shirt over his head and stepped out of his pants. The underwear did not go initially, but after intense pressure by the woman's unbroken gaze, he eventually took it off too. She stepped closer, eyes scanning his skin with a soldier's discipline, as her fingers trailed along his arms, inspecting the folds at his elbows and wrists, then his torso, before tapping near the ribs and sternum as if listening for false panels. Finally, she knelt before him, running her hand along his inner thighs, lifting gently, before cupping beneath the fold where thigh met hip. Her hands moved with no hesitation, palms brushing his rear, fingers pressing in without shame as she checked between the cheeks, her gaze locked onto his the entire time with the cold detachment of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Leo forced his face to remain neutral, but his mind, trained though it was, could not help but wince inwardly. This has got to be one of the most degrading moments of my life, he thought, as her hand briefly lifted to his chin, turning his face to the left and then to the right, as if confirming that even his ears bore no sigils. As, at last, she stepped back, removed her gloves, and gave a short nod. "Clear," she said simply, as she tossed Leo a new set of robes, and asked him to change into them. These robes looked like a patient's medical gown, that was 50% transparent under light, and had no folds to hide anything tiny or large, as the guild seemed to be very thorough in how they allowed a visitor to enter the vault. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.